Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can take those numbers. So the,
you know, like the Fibonacci sequence.
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol. Golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And joining me today is Mukunda, who's been on here, what, 3 times now?
I think just once, man.
Once? Oh, yeah, that's right. No, I was on your channel. Yeah, this would be
you're on my channel. That's right.
I was on your channel, yeah. So, yeah, you were here before, but your link's in the description. You have your own channel now. It was on. You have a master's in what is exactly your master's in?
Yeah, so I'm actually a lawyer. I have my Juris Doctorate. I've been practicing for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was in my master's program for continental philosophy. I studied at Boston University. I didn't quite finish it just because a couple things came up. But yeah, I took out my course load and took Greek and I studied Sanskrit in college. And I've been basically studying the Eastern traditions for, I don't know, like 30 plus years now. Grew up in a Vaishnavite tradition.
Yeah. And you know, obviously you really know what you're talking about when it comes to religion in the East, the Vedic denominations between Buddhism and what we call Hinduism. And
yeah. I mean, it's so much. I have a pretty good grasp. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to get you on here for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to be raging out if I'm by myself. I want to, you'll be able to calm me down. Just, all right, it's not that big of a deal. Who cares? And so, but also I want to get your thoughts on, because this is going to involve paganism and ethics outside of Judaism and Christianity. And what we're going to see is there's claims being thrown around that, like, while Christianity didn't bring morals to the world per se, they'll say, they'll admit that at least, but it did start. The pagans didn't really have morals in their religion the way Jews and Christians did, is what I kind of gathered when I watched it the first time. I didn't even finish it, so maybe when we get to a certain point, I'll be watching fresh. I watched the first half. I think I watched half of the video. The video is from Bart's channel, and by the way, it says titled "Bart Ehrman Pagan versus Christian." That's because I just downloaded it, so we don't have to watch ads. Save the
smart move. Smart move.
But the video is on Bart's channel, 17,000 views 1 day ago. Did Christianity make the world moral? And this is what we're going to get into. So I got some sources. I got some Aristotle. I got some Parmenides. I got some Pythagorean text, and I want to get into it. But before we even let's pray, I just want to give a little background on this topic real quick. So I posted about, I don't know, a few weeks ago. Let's see, May 2nd. Oh, this was a while ago. Okay, 2 months ago. I posted, wow, time's flying. So I saw this. I saw this post, and it's a quote from Bart's, I don't know if it's from his upcoming book or what, but the quote is, prior to the Christian conquest of the empire, the Western world knew of no such thing. Oh my God, that phrasing is so crazy. Knew of no such thing as hospitals, orphanages, private charities, or governmental assistance to the poor. Okay. Bart Ehrman has no clue what he's talking about. So just off the rip, so the Alimenta, I mean, this is not a primary source, but like there's no way I'm wrong about this. Anyone can look this up. There is the Alimenta program that was a Romans had welfare programs. So one of the claims he made is governmental assistance to the poor, private charities, orphanages, hospitals. Now, hospitals is a tricky thing. What do you mean by hospital? Because technically the Greeks did have somewhat of a hospital when it comes to a place where people can go to meet a specialist to be treated. That was the Asclepian temples. But the one that bothers me the most is the idea of governmental assistance to the poor. The Romans had the Alimenta, which was a welfare program that existed for almost a century, or I mean, over 2 centuries. I mean, 98 AD to 72 AD. It was probably introduced by Nerva and later expanded by Trajan, blah, 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 blah. But it was designed to subsidize orphans. This one kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Orphans and poor children throughout Italy. So he has two of his claims were orphanages and poor people. No, this is the system of the Roman Empire before Christianity had any claim in the governmental programs or anything, or any power or anything. They were already doing this. Romans were already doing this. They were subsidizing education, food, income, and even orphanages. So that to me is fun. And by the way, this is not even the first time they had a program like this. You can go back to the Roman Republic era. This is the Roman Empire days. Go back to the Roman Republic era, and you will find similar programs. For example, the Gracchi brothers, before, right at the end of the 2nd century BC, right before the time of like Marius and Sulla, they were subsidizing farmers, plebeians, and the poor. They were setting up a tribune to the plebs. They were really thinking about these things already. Christianity did not come along and fix these things these things were already being thought about and talked about and voted on in the Senate. These are already things that were going on in the world of educated Roman intelligentsia. So he just demonstrates how much he has no idea what he's talking about. And this, I'm so sick of so many of these Bible scholars. They do this. They leave their field of study. They go from, he's a textual critic. So he studies the variants of manuscripts, like Matthew 12:3 says this, and this manuscript says this, and this manuscript has a variant, and this version in the Latin side, it says this. That's what Bart's supposed to be telling us. He's not supposed to be telling us about Roman religion and orphanages. I'm sorry. I'm so sick. Yeah. I'm so sick of people like Dan McClellan talking about paganism. You're a Bible scholar. Don't talk about paganism. There's scholars that I can talk to for paganism, not you. Anyways, go ahead.
No, but a lot of scholars start doing that kind of stuff when they start doing, like public books for the public, right? They want to make these audacious claims. Like, for example, Tom Holland with, his book of Dominion, or
yes, and who's by the way, who's not an expert. I'm not saying he doesn't know his shit. I've read enough of him, and I can tell he knows his shit. He studies. He's probably knows more than I do. But that does not make him an authority in these areas. These are really nuanced. Complex areas of study. And to just drop your whole entire bet on one answer to these things is nonsense. Go ahead, I cut you off.
No. But that's exactly the point. The point is, once they start trying to write for the public outside of their expertise, they need to make larger and more audacious claims about what they're saying. Because otherwise, why is someone going to go read the book if the book is, well, they made minor innovations and we're good, right? You have to really make this really big claim about how it changed the world and this and that. And I understand that for the purposes of like, drawing eyes, but hopefully the insides of the book are way more nuanced. But again, they're written for its public audience. And I'm sure you'll find a lot of scholars of classicists and Roman scholars and Greek scholars that are going to be like, yo, these are kind of crazy claims.
Yes. I can't wait to see that happen because it's going to. So let me just read this off. By the way, Constellation Pegasus says, I learned about something incredible today. Want me to tell you about it? Yeah, if you want to, in a few minutes or after we're done discussing this, we can circle back to that. Thank you for the super chat. The motherfucking Wendy Berg has become a YouTube member. Thank you for that. What does Bart say about mythicists? I will come back to that super chat. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. I will get to this. This will definitely tie in. And then Pismu with a super sticker. Thank you for the super sticker. Appreciate y'all. Now, what I said about this before I play the video was, this is why I'm so critical of New Testament scholars. I think, and think many of them, like Bart Ehrman, Dan McClellan, should have THDs and not PhDs. And the reason why I said that is because this is misleading. When you have this next to your name, people think that's like, oh my God, he's like a scientist. He's like wearing a lab coat or something. When really these are theology majors. These are divinity school graduates. They should have a different designation because they I don't know. That's my personal opinion. Who cares about that? But this is what I wrote. They say things that are objectively incorrect with their full chest out. The reason why I put Dan in here is because he'll say things like, in Roman biographies, talking about Christmas, right? In the ancient world, when Roman biographies were written, oftentimes when the person that was written about would die, the author would just assume that they died on the day they were born or conceived on that day. I've said this multiple times. Guess how true that is. Guess how many Roman biographies we can find? Maybe one. Maybe he used two. Zero. It's made up. It doesn't exist. The only thing that comes close is Moses in Exodus, who dies in the book of Moses, or in the book of Exodus. It says, and Moses was 120 years when he died. It doesn't say Moses died on the day he was born. This is later people looking back and going, wait, did he die exactly on the 120th year? I don't know. You tell me. And it has nothing to do with Jesus gaining 9 months. Okay, that's why I threw this in there. That's why I threw his name in there, because it's very typical that you see these two do this. They say things with their full chest out. They make historical claims that have no qualifications on. And then people think this is the case. So I get comments all the time for my videos where I do all this research. I cite all these scholars. I'm digging into I'm digging into books from Routledge and Oxford, and digging into,
and that stuff's expensive too.
Expensive. I'm going all in on this stuff, and then I get a comment going, Dan McClellan debunked this on TikTok. He did a TikTok video on this. He didn't debunk it. And then I watch the video, and it's just an assertion. Because it's an assertion against another assertion with no evidence, no arguments, no nothing. They don't know the difference between an assertion and an argument. That's another thing. So now every inspiring philosophy apologist will be spreading this to millions of people who will think it's true because a respected PhD said it. Here's why Bart is objectively wrong. You can read about ancient forms of hospitals in Alexandria, Rome, Athens, Pergamon. And I was just talking to Gad Barnea about in Alexandria, they had not just the Asclepian temples, but they actually had centers for healing. That the only way to describe it is like an ancient hospital. And they had them in Pergamon too. People were treated medically. Going back to Asclepius temples were basically hospitals too. Now, people can push back on that and say it's not really a hospital. And I would say you're right. That I am kind of being vague here. But the point is that the idea behind having a designated place for people to go who have a broken leg or they're sick or something, that was already a thing in the ancient world. This is not an innovation that just came out of nowhere. I would actually argue that the hospital is an evolution of ideas that goes back to the Asclepius temples. That's what I would say about that. And by the way, we even use this symbol to this very day on hospitals. That's not a coincidence. This is the symbol of medicine, the rod of Asclepius. And I wrote, anyone with a 101 claim on ancient Rome knows about the Alimenta welfare programs and orphan programs. And by the way, the temple of Ephesus, Artemis, was an orphanage. It was used as an orphanage. That's where you took children who lost their parents. They would grow up in the temple, and they become priests and priestesses of Artemis. She was the childbearing goddess. The gods played their role on earth. That's why I love paganism. It actually had a real function in the world. Asclepius, healing. Artemis, orphanages. You know what I mean? Dionysus, Bacchanalias. They all had their focus. They all had their purpose in the real world. Anyways, as far as charity goes, this is just complete nonsense. The concept of charity is found everywhere on every continent. And I wanted to ask you about this, about charity in the Far East. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the moral values found within Dharma, right? So it's called Dana, which means charity. So there's two types of charity, which is one type of charity is the formal guest charity. So if you have a person come to your house as a guest, and this is not a wandering guest, but like at a prescribed time and place, that's a certain type of charity you give. And then there's the charity for everybody else. Anyone. So one of the things of charity is you're required to give a certain percentage of your income, whether that's, you know, through the food or farming that you produce, money you get, whatever it is, to ascetics, wandering ascetics, poor, the homeless, and to women that are single women or, you know, on their own. And all part of this is also it's found in like texts like Yoga Sutras, Mahabharata, the Dharma Shastras. It's all over the place, and all this stuff, by the way, is all pre-Christian. So you're talking somewhere between the realms of 8th century BCE to roughly like, you know, 2nd, 3rd century, 4th, even 1st century BCE, right?
And that's
so
why
there's a lot of stuff there.
And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because when we had this conversation, it seems like people cut off the world after Turkey. They just go, or Persia maybe at the farthest. Yeah. They just cut off the world and go Christian innovation, and they forget that a lot of these ideas are all the way in the Far East, let alone the West. And it's like they're not blocked off from each other. The Silk Road goes from China all the way to Persia, and then Persia has a road that goes all the way to the coast of the Mediterranean. These roads are connecting each other. People are trading. Julius Caesar had silk in one of the descriptions of Julius Caesar entering the Senate wearing silk. There was only one place you could have got silk. That's China. He was trading with Greeks who were trading with Indians who were trading with Chinese people. Or at the time it would have been the Han dynasty. So we'd be clear on that.
Well, I mean, it'd be different dynasties basically all the time, but
Han would be Caesar's time. Han.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, like, even for example, when you brought up government assistance programs for the poor, right? One of the texts, one can say the earliest text that we have on political philosophy in Indian context is this text called Arthashastra, written right after the time of Alexander the Great. So basically, Alexander the Great came roughly 320s, I think, to India, somewhere in that period. And after he came in, there was a desire to unify the entire India to prevent this from happening again. And the first emperor of the Mauryan dynasty, Chandragupta Maurya, his prime minister was this guy named Chanakya or Kautilya. And he wrote this text called the Arthashastra, which means the science of wealth. Basically, his argument is he writes a book basically where you get this. You heard the maxim, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Mm-hmm. That's from that text, right? So it's roughly around the time of Sun Tzu. So he goes through things like what the king should do in warfare, what the king should do in peacetime, what the king should do. So the government's obligation at all times is one, to maintain hospitals, maintain funds for the women, the widows, the poor, the disabled, to give them not only money but jobs. The government gave them welfare jobs, sweeping the streets, cleaning up things like that, of that nature. And he also had provisions for doctors and hospitals.
Wow.
The state
those pillars that Ashoka puts up. Yeah. So this is another thing I forgot about this, and Bart obviously didn't know this because he doesn't. We're gonna see he never even mentions this. There's these pillars of Ashoka that were all over like India and I think even beyond India a little bit. and they're basically
absolutely beyond India.
Yeah, like very far
in Aramaic. He wrote in Aramaic.
Yeah, and there's even letters to King Antiochus. I think it was the first Antiochus. I think it was.
Yes.
It was one of the early Antiochus, either first or second, not third or fourth for sure. But it says Antiochus, when my people are coming over to you, make sure you give them doctors, is basically asking for health care.
Yeah.
It's basically a universal health care plan set up by the Indian king to the leaders of Egypt, Greece, and Persia, and so forth, all across the Middle East to Greece. Antiochus was listed by name.
Right.
So there is a universal healthcare plan happening in the 3rd century BCE.
It probably goes before that, but I mean, for example, like there's 2 ancient medical texts, both of them pre-BCE. I mean pre-Common Era, which is Charaka Samhita and Shushruta Samhita. So those texts also talk about things like rhinoplasty, how to do plastic surgery on the nose, vaccinations, for example, but not the vaccinations we have today. But kind of what they would do is they would take every year they would have doctors wandering the land, taking the infections from last year, the diseases like grafts of skin, and putting it on other people to try to inculcate them from.
That's some advanced shit right there.
So they talk about in that text medical ethics, right?
Wow.
So the medical ethics, it requires that a doctor see all patients, not based on caste or social status,
right?
They have to have nurses. They had nurses and doctors and things of that nature. They had to set up a location that's clean, free of disease, free of these kind of things, and have all these items at hand to take care of the common diseases. And it was open to all.
That's crazy. And that just shows you how like this, and some of these innovations are just like, they're just not innovations. It's just hindsight is 2020 for the victor, which are the Christians who are in control of all they're the ones passing down the text that they want to pass down. And I'm not going to lie, they did a good job. They did a good job preserving the pagan sources. I'm not saying there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that said the Christians, they destroyed all the pagan work. No, they didn't. They actually did a good job, especially in Byzantium or the Eastern Roman Empire. The West, not as good. The Latin side, they didn't preserve things as well. Luckily, the Greeks preserved everything. Even the Arabs preserved more than the Latins, I think. But anyways, I'm going to finish this off and I want to get to the video. So I ended up writing, if Bart would have said, this is me just leveling with Bart here. If Bart would have said, Christians prioritize these things over other things like aristocracy, meritocracy, military expansion, etc., then I would have no problem with this post. For example, let me just rewrite this. Prior to the Christian conquest of the Roman Empire, the Western world did not prioritize things like hospitals, orphanages, private charities, and governmental assistance to the poor. These things Christians prioritized over things that the Greeks and Romans prioritized, which was like military advancements and aristocracy and the things that I listed. If Bart would have said that, thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. I agree with that because that is true. The Christians prioritized sort of like assistance to the poor and getting rid of the plebeian class and making them equal to the classes of the aristocracy, which are the patrician class, right? And they sort of shed away the class system. The pagan world was very much of a class system. I would agree with that, but you cannot say these are innovations. They did exist, just to a different extent. So that was my argument. And by the way, there's 462 people like this. So it did pretty well. Now, I just wanted to get people off the rip to see why I'm getting so angry about this, because here we go. A day ago, another video just dropped. Now it starts off pretty good. I was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong about Bart. And then it just goes sideways. Watch. So let's play this. I think I have it on 1.25 speed, so we don't have to be here all day, but let's play this.
Jesus' ethical teachings are often touted as being revolutionary for the ancient world. The pagan cultures that preceded Christianity are commonly understood as being immoral, full of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or, 2 out of the 3. But just how close to historical reality are these views?
That was a great question. It started off with, here's the misconception that everyone has. How true is this? So I'm sitting here going, okay, All right, you can tell that it was framed right. It was like the softball was being thrown underhand for Bart. In fact, even better example would be she set up the tee, took the softball, put it on the tee, and just walked away. And Bart walks up to the tee like with his bat. He's going. Missed the whole entire thing. All right, so let's see what he says.
Today, Dr. Bart Ehrman joins me for the first of a special two-part episode to dive into ancient ethics and whether Jesus actually changed anything.
Let me skip over this.
Best-selling author started on ethics and how Jesus may or may not have changed the moral trajectory of the Western world. But before that, Bart, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. Ironically,
I forgot there's like a whole bunch of
running around at work, kind of around that, which is
right. My daughter has, and you've done like this.
I don't think house is actually not going to be able to do anything. And
bear with me. There's a whole bunch of nonsense in the beginning. We'll get through it.
Toddler. Going to the UK for a couple of weeks is it's okay. About ethics and morality and the impact Jesus had on those things. And we're talking about that because it's the topic of your most recent book, which is not out yet. But you've, I believe, finished the writing and the editing stage. Am I correct in that?
Just this afternoon, I've finished putting in the final edit.
I want to know who asked Bart Ehrman, out of all people, to write a book about Christians and morality versus pagans. That type of. Was it his own idea?
I think it has to be his own idea because I think a lot of people.
Nobody would ever come to him for this. He's not the person to go to for this.
Well, I think it stems from his prior book, which was how Christianity won.
Which is I thought was terrible, by the way.
Well, I haven't finished reading it yet.
Yeah.
And then I think this is a follow-up. Is maybe this is why he thinks they won in that sense.
Well, no, you're right, because in the book he doesn't talk about like how the Theodosian law codes basically set up a social pressure where nobody really had a choice but to kind of follow what the dictates was. It doesn't mean that they killed pagans. Like it doesn't mean that, but social pressure wins all the time. People are social pressured even today to do things that they don't want to do. He never gets into that aspect. He just gets into like the Christians were dominating in areas of like, they were more rational than the average pagan. It's complete shit.
Right. But I just want to say, I think you and I don't really, our issue isn't with Bart's expertise in his area of specialty.
No.
Or is it, which is like, I think he does a fantastic job there. But I think
if he's talking about manuscripts and shit, I'm listening. I watch every video he does on
dating of those things and how those things are dealt with all over the map. But like the moment you step out of your wheelhouse and get into a different whole other realm of where there's other experts.
This takes philosophical training in like ethics and reading Aristotle and Parmenides, and he's never done this stuff. He's literally talking out of his ass right now, which I'm going to show. And it's just crazy that this is the guy people think is like the know-it-all for this stuff. But all right, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And I still have to enter them, and then I'll have it sent off. It takes about a year for a book to get published. People don't realize this, but this is supposed to come out, I think, in March of 2026. So I'm basically done with this part of it.
Excellent. So all the research is still nice and fresh in your brain. When did you first become interested in Christianity's role in the development of ethics in the Western world?
Well, I suppose when I was a young Christian, I simply assumed that Christianity brought morality into the world. As you were saying, all those pagans, man, they were wild.
So he comes from that position, and he's saying that he's in a different position. Let's see how far away he is from this position. Notice how he framed it that way. This made me think when I'm watching it, makes me go, oh, maybe he's learned something in the last like 2 months or something. But we're going to find out. I don't think his position is that far off from his old position. Watch.
They may not have had rock and roll, but they certainly had a lot of other things. And we always, I guess, when I was an evangelical, we just assumed that, there's no reason for a pagan to be moral. I mean, even the gods were immoral. Why would they be moral? And so that Christianity brought a sense of ethics into the world. And that, I guess I always thought that was one of the reasons it was successful, because people got tired of the profligate life and wanted to have something a little bit more sane and sober, and became Christians. Later, I started thinking maybe that would not be attractive. I don't know. But
by the way, that idea is still passed around in a lot of these circles of like, a lot of these like believing divinity school types. Like they still say this. They still will, like you'll hear Gary Habermas say this all the time.
Yeah, but
that like
here's
the Christians were the good moralists and the pagans were doing like sacrifices and shit.
But here's what I mean is, what do they mean by that? So if we want to get into that, so you might have Zeus doing actions, Apollo doing actions, Artemis doing all these actions. Some of them we find moral, some of them we don't. But all those issues that you find with those gods, you find in one God. In Yahweh,
in Yahweh,
right?
Right. It's no different.
I don't see that difference, right? I don't see where, like, for example, like,
but you and I also know that the myths mean something,
right?
And like Zeus turning into all these different animals and having sex with all these different women is almost like it's almost like Zeus's own version of the 12 labors, where he's going through metamorphoses and he's doing all these things that look on the surface, they look horrific. But then you realize that there's different layers of the myth that mean either it's reflecting something in nature, or it's reflecting some sort of emotional thing we go through, or it's something deeper than what you're just reading on Zeus had, Zeus ravaged goddess or something. Like there's always something going on that never gets brought up.
Let me ask you this question. So in your reading of the Bible in the Gospels, right, when the angel comes to tell Mary she's going to be the mother of, the Messiah and whatnot, was there a sense of consent there?
No, zero.
Okay.
It was, and actually, in fact, the scene of Mary being met by the angel Gabriel is very typical, in my opinion, of Greco-Roman birth scenes, where God just shows up and says, "You're going to have my divine child, whether you like it or not." So
I'll give you this example, the corollary.
And Mary's freaking out, like scared and terrified.
Right. In the Mahabharata, for example, like the protagonists, so their mother Kunti had got this mantra from the sage. And the mantra basically allows her to call any god she wants in the mantra to procreate with her. So she, being like a 15, 16-year-old girl, was like, I don't know if I believe this, chants the mantra, and the god comes to her, the sun god. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, I was just testing out the mantra. I don't really want it. And the sun god said, basically, I'm bound by the rules of this mantra. I have to give you a child. Yeah. So like, because you use the mantra. So it's similarly, what I'm saying is, in the Indian context, there's this concept: the mantra binds the god. The power of the mantra binds the deity to the action that the mantra is evoking of that deity. So
wow.
Similarly, it is somewhat similar to like the angel coming down and then having to to procreate with Mary. And although they say it's immaculate or whatever, who knows?
No, it sounds more like a typical theophany where, for example, I'll even give you an example where there's a birth scene, a birth narrative for one of the sons of Zeus, Apathis. Right. By the way, Apathis is synced with Dionysus and, believe it or not, the god Horus. In Plutarch. Plutarch talks about how Apathis is basically Dionysus and Horus into one god. This is in Plutarch's On Isis and Osiris. Apathis is born from a flash of lightning coming down and impregnating the goddess Io, who's Isis. And so there is no sex. It's just a divine, immaculate, a flash of light comes down and she's pregnant with the divine child of Zeus. And the name Apathis means, guess what it means? To lay hands on in Greek.
Interesting.
Which means he's born from almost an anointed one without the oil. He was born from Zeus laying hands on her. That's what that's what the lightning was. Zeus touches Io, who's also called Isis, according to all the sources, and he just touches her, and a flash of lightning comes down, and Apathis is born. And the name Apathis means hands on. Zeus put hands on. And so like this is another one of these sort of like, you're chosen by God, have the child right now, boom, you're pregnant.
Right.
She immediately has the child right on the scene. That's the birth of Apathis.
I think in the difference in the Indian sense is going to be that it's relational, right? The god himself is bound by the rules. And so it's as if both parties might not consent to it, but it's because the rules dictate it happens.
Right.
All right, so we can go ahead, right? Well, yeah.
I love Topo's text. It's a really good website. People should check it out. Let me just share my screen and I just want people to see what I'm talking about. I like to, when I say something, I like to actually show it. So, okay, Apathis. This is look at multiple sources on this god. So let's just go through them real quick. You'll give birth to a son named after Zeus's fathering, dark Apaphis, meaning brush against, brush against or put hands on, who will reap crops from all that the following, the 5th generation after composed and blah, 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 blah. That's one of the sources. Jerome writes about him. Okay, let's see. I don't know. Let's skip Jerome for now. I want to see the ancient sources, what they say. It says right here, Aeschylus, and I now invoke as our champion beyond the sea, the calf born of Zeus, the offspring of the flower grazing cow. That's Io. She gets put into the form of a cow. Our ancestors' caress of Zeus's breath. The caress of Zeus's breath. The appointed period confirmed itself. The suited event, Apaphis, whom she gave birth to. That's one of the sources. Here's another one where it says Zeus's begotten calf, Apaphis, and truly named from laying hands on, and who was begotten Apaphis. So, like you see right there, laying hands on him got him born. There's no sex. It's a virgin birth. Here's another one. In sting tormented Io, Zeus was the through endless time, and Zeus this ray sprung Apaphis.
And he says that by the unharming might of his hand, by his divine breath, she gave birth.
He just touches her and she's pregnant. That's it. That's all that happens. No one ever talks about this source. And by the way, Bart Ehrman's one of these scholars who did a whole course saying the virgin births are not real, only in Christianity. I'm not making this up. And he never mentions Apaphis. He could have at least brought up Apaphis and says, well, it doesn't say virgin birth, so it's just, we're just gonna, he could have said that at least. He doesn't even bring it up. I don't think he even knows who Apaphis is. I swear to God, I don't even think he does. Here's Euripides saying, blah 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 blah. Where is it? Which showed them and these sprung from old our ancestor Io, Apaphis, progeny of Zeus. On thee I have called. I think I'm trying to find the one where the lightning comes down. I wish that I could find that one, but there's just so many sources. I'm not gonna be able to find it. Anyways, you guys can go find that on your own. One of them is lightning that comes down. It's the cool one. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but you can find it. Anyways, let's go back to the video.
Yeah.
And let's see what they say.
Anyway, that's what I thought. And none of that's true, as we'll see.
So I've been using kind of the terms ethics and morality almost interchangeably. Could we just take a minute and give some definitions so people know exactly what we're talking about?
Watch this.
Yeah, it turns out to be kind of a complicated matter. You would think it'd be fairly simple. A lot of people just use morality and ethics synonymously. I think a lot of scholars think of morality as basically issues connected with personal behavior and how you behave. And ethics tends to be thought of as more kind of how you think about morality. How scholars.
That was just talking out of his ass right there. We want to know why? Because ethics comes from the Greek word ethica. Morality comes from the Latin word moralia. They both are the same word. In fact, the text from Aristotle called Nicomachean Ethics is translated into Latin as Magna Moralia. And on the counter side of that, Plutarch's Moralia in Greek is called Ethica. It's the same word. One's Greek, one's Latin. Now, I guess in modern times, people think of these things maybe a little bit different, but not really. For him to say that the way he just talking out of his ass. I don't even think he even thought of that or looked it up. I think he just thought that sounded smart and said it. But she had the right, at least like intuitively was like morality, ethics. What's the difference, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I might be getting a little too picky here, but whatever. It's just I'm just pointing out that this guy's talking out of his ass. He's just talking out of his ass.
Well, yeah, I think that's correct when it comes to the ancient world. I obviously in the modern world we have these concepts of morality and ethics being like separate things, like he said.
But a lot of times you'll see ethics and morality as one topic.
Yeah,
they're not like. I get it. I get what he's trying to say. Ethics is kind of a different category. Morality is more of the action of it. But I don't even think that would be the correct way to go about it. I think he could have just said, "Yeah, they're interchangeable. Let's move on." Like he just kind of gave a bullshit answer, in my opinion.
I think for his thesis to work, he has to have that demarcation. I think when you're thinking about it, right? Like, because again, we've talked about this before. Is we can put on our modern lens and go look at the past and be like, well, that's ethics and that's morality, but that's not how they saw it, right? They saw it all as being like this one,
and
thing,
that's not
is
how
like,
linguistics works either. We decide what these words mean. If you want to use, if you decided to use morality and interchangeable with ethics, there's literally nothing stopping you, and there's not like there is no, you can do that easily.
Sure. I think I could do that, but the question is, would that be accepted by the modern world? Probably not as much. I mean, either we have to talk in similar language where we agree on the terms, or it doesn't make sense, so I think in this context, just from the East, right, we have the word Dharma, which is the overall, like, is so complex to break out, because it can mean ethics, it can mean quote unquote morality, it can mean rules of law and regulation or righteousness, it can mean, or even like the nature of a thing, a dharma of a thing, right? It's right. So it's a complex word, which again indicates to me that part of the world at least thought about these things as at least synonymous at some levels, and interchangeable at others.
Yeah, and like, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Like, this is kind of dumb. Yeah, but I just wanted to point out that I just think that was just like out of. I didn't think he just said that out of his ass, in my opinion.
Discuss what is moral behavior and what is not moral behavior, so that ethics is more of kind of an intellectual category and moral is more of a behavioral category. But there are different opinions about it, and so I, as long as people know what we're talking about, I just hope we know what we're talking about.
It's the hope for everyone.
I hope
so. I mentioned in my introduction, and you've said here that there's this idea for a lot of people, I think, that before Christianity, there wasn't any kind of moral, ethical system. People just kind of did whatever they wanted, because why wouldn't you? So did pre-Christian cultures have any concept of morality? And if they did, how did it differ to what we would understand it to be today?
Well, now that I look back, I can't believe I ever thought otherwise. I mean, of course they had morality, and they had ethical systems. I mean, the human race.
Yeah.
Oh, I got nervous for a second there, but at least we're starting off with something normal. At least we're in the normal world. We're not in the Twilight Zone yet. All right. It's good. Let's see what happens.
Would not have survived if there wasn't without morality. I mean, morality involves things like treating others well and helping people who are in need. No species can survive. No species of any kind can survive without some forms of altruism. Without some forms of helping other people. And so moral codes develop as groups of people realize that you've got to have ways of living them with each other. Otherwise, if every person is every person for themselves, it's easy to get picked off. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to have community coherence. And quite apart from kind of Greek and Roman and ancient culture, this is just how humans and every other species has to live if they're going to live. But within Greek and Roman worlds, there definitely were. I mean, it wasn't just that people were basically moral. They're basically just as moral as people are today. I mean, the reality is everybody, people loved their children and they brought them up, tried to bring them up well, and they had values and they had standards and they had things they should do and things they shouldn't do. And it's part of every world. But in the Greek and Roman worlds, there was also a lot of discussion about morality and a lot of treatises on ethics that go very far back.
Now, that was a good answer. There's Greeks were thinking about ethics and morality. They have treatises that go all the way back, Aristotle and the Nicomachean Ethics. You have, before Aristotle, you have the pre-Socratics writing about ethics and codes and stuff like that. You have, like, even in the political treatises like Solon and Draco, that's morals and ethics. And not even just the Greeks, the Romans had the 12 tables, and you have the Augustan reforms in the 1st century BC. Before them, Sulla makes reforms. Sulla made it illegal to do human sacrifice. That's morality. That's ethics. That's in the 1st century BC. And that's not even Greek. We're talking Latin. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about this too, even Aesop's fables are a clear moral, ethical teachings given to children and other people through the language of animals or things of that nature, which it's a lot of scholars think that they probably got this from some of the Panchatantra, which is the Hindu text, or the Jataka tales from the Buddhist texts, which are very similar.
Yeah, the Aesop fables are like the oldest. I mean, there are people who argue that those fables actually look like they're going back to something even older. They're being passed down orally, just like Homer's argued to be passed down orally, and the fables as well. Some people think Aesop didn't even exist, and same with Homer. Some people think Aesop and Homer didn't exist, and these are a collection of texts being passed down into Greek and then translate, and maybe in a different language, maybe I don't know, maybe through Persian or something. Who knows? But the point is, you're right. These are moral texts. The fables are.
Yeah, and they're teaching children and other people how to live and what values are important and how to treat each other and things like that. So,
and that's another thing he didn't. Bart never says in that answer. Bart says they made treatises on ethics, the Greeks, but notice how he didn't say ethics are in Homer. Homer tells you what to do when you meet strangers and how to treat strangers good and give them hospitality. That's in Homer.
Right.
Homer teaches you about hubris, about what not to do, how not to act, why the gods would turn on you, things you would do to make your gods turn on you. That's ethics. The myths have ethics in them. I didn't hear that yet. And I think this is where he fundamentally gets this all wrong, is he tries to separate the philosophy from mythology, and this is okay. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but so far the answer was fine.
Yeah.
So were any of these ideas of morality or ethical discussions grounded in a religious understanding? Was there like a code of ethics that was a religious requirement, as some Christians might argue exists today?
This is one thing that makes ancient morality in both the Greek and Roman worlds, which I talk about the Greek and Roman worlds because they're the ones at the foundation of our culture. And so as much as,
So I guess we just cut the world in half and just Greek and Romans. That's all that we have. That's all we get to look at right here.
Well, I think he's talking about the Western world or American.
Right. But the world is not small. The world is not divided like that.
No, it's not.
Have a conversation about morality and ethics being innovations by some group. You have to include the groups that are in connection with these groups. The Indians are in connection with the Greeks. The Persians are in connection with the Greeks. The Persians are in connection with the Romans. The people that live in modern day Afghanistan, which was Greco-Bactria, were in contact with everyone, and the Egyptians, everyone. So he just arbitrarily cuts it off right there. But even if we do that, he's still wrong about what he's about to get into. Let's just let him finish first.
Yeah.
Let me just back up a few seconds. Actually,
as you foundation of Greek and Roman world. This is one thing that makes ancient morality in both the Greek and Roman worlds, which I talk about the Greek and Roman worlds because they're the ones at the foundation of our culture. And so as much as, as you love the Assyrians, they were not as significant for America today or Britain today as Greek and Rome were. And the thing about Greek and Roman culture, as is true of a lot of religions throughout the world, the ethical codes were not directly related, for the most part, to their religion.
Wrong.
Religion in most of antiquity, especially in Greece and Rome.
It falls apart right here. That was a crazy claim to make right there. The Greek and Roman ethical codes were not tied to the religion, he just said.
Yep.
I just want people to think. I'm not taking them out of context. And I just want people to listen to this for a second.
The thing about Greek and Roman culture, as is true of a lot of religions throughout the world, the ethical codes were not directly related, for the most part, to their religion.
Okay. Let's be fair.
That statement is,
he says directly
crazy.
For the most part. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because I would argue that it is directly connected. I would say the opposite. For the most part, it is directly connected.
I agree with you.
The Delphic maxims at Delphi are a set of moral, ethical codes. They even use the word ethica to describe these. 147 maxims. They're documented. Most of them aren't even there anymore. I think Know Thyself is still there. I don't even know if that's redone or stuff, but that's one of them. But there's a whole list of 147 ethical codes written on the temple of Apollo. How do you separate that from the religion? It's on the temple of the god, written right there. The Delphic maxims. They're listed. Pliny the Elder mentions them. He says they're written in letters of gold, he says, when he visited the temple. The Delphic maxims. You have the Pythagorean sentences. Where does it say? This is from Sextus the Pythagorean. 451 of these. To neglect things of the smallest consequence is not least thing in human life. The sage and the despiser of wealth most resemble God. What is that? That had nothing to do with religion, huh? Do not investigate the name of God, because you will not find it. This is why I love the Pythagoreans. They have the unknowable God, the unnameable, unknowable one. Those are the real monotheists. If you want to point to real monotheists, it's them. The Pythagoreans.
Doesn't Paul say that the unknown God is our God?
He goes, you have the unknowable, and then it says, for everything called by a name receives its appellation from which is more than itself. So that is one person that calls another who that hears. Who is given a name to God? The word God, theos, is not a name of his, but an indication of what we conceive of him. God is a light, incapable of receiving its opposite. And so it goes on and on and on, and it starts getting into ethics. It starts saying, if you know, chaste and wise soul is the prophet of truth. A wise intellect is the mirror of God. The wise man follows God. Divine wisdom is true science. These are ethical maxims in the Pythagorean sources.
Example, but not only that, man. I mean, where do you think these people get their ethical, moral values from? Magical, ether? They're getting it from.
They get it from the culture,
and the religion.
It gets, and he even cites Aristotle's Nicomacheia, that he talks about it like it's just some great text that he read, which I don't think he has, because if he did, he would know. In the Nicomachean Ethics, he cites Homer, and he starts bringing up passages in Homer and why. I'll even read it right now. He says,
go ahead.
He just says, let us now make a fresh beginning and point out the moral states to be avoided. There are three kinds: vice, incontinence, brutishness. The contraries of two of these are evident. One we call excellence, the other we call continence. To brutishness, it would be most fitting to oppose superhuman excellence, something heroic and divine, as Homer has represented, Priam saying of Hector that he was very good. And he quotes Homer, for he seemed not he, the child of mortal man, but as one that of God's seed came. How is that separated from religion? Homer is the religious culture. Homer is their sacred song that they sing in these temples. At these temples, I should say, not in the temples, at these temples.
Right.
You know what
right.
I mean?
But here's the thing is, a lot of times, like if you look at it from a historical perspective, a lot of the myths are also created to reflect a moral value.
Yeah.
And then that myth, like hospitality, right? There's a culture of hospitality in Greece, but they have to ground it in something.
Yes.
So they ground it in what? In the gods.
Myths.
The
myth of Philemon and Bacchus is a Phrygian
right.
myth where these two gods, Hermes and Zeus, show up as mortal humans and in disguise, and they go to these houses that all reject them. They don't want any strangers in their houses.
Right.
Finally, they find this old couple, Philemon and Bacchus. It's very much like Abraham, by the way, where these three men show up and they get rejected by all these wicked people, and then Abraham lets them in, gives them good hospitality. Same thing happens here. Philemon and Bacchus lets in Zeus, and they give them their last bottle of wine, and they feed them, and then Zeus gives them all these riches, and then he destroys the entire city, kills everybody who didn't give him good hospitality, just like Abraham, just like the Abraham story.
Right.
And he says, because you guys gave me good hospitality, I'll grant you any wish you want. And they're like, we want to build a temple here. And they built a temple. Anyways, the point is, you're right. The myth was grounded in hospitality, which is a code of ethics. You can't separate ethics from mythology.
And I'll give you another story, like from the Mahabharata. So at the end of the Mahabharata, the winner does this massive sacrifice, giving away wealth to everybody, giving food, clothing, land to anyone that came to the sacrifice. But he sees this mongoose that's rolling around on the ground in front of him, that's half golden and half brown. And the mongoose obviously talks in real life, but he asks the mongoose, what are you doing? And the mongoose is saying, I'm trying to see if your sacrifice has any merit to it. And he goes, he's like, it doesn't. And he was like, what do you mean? He's like, then he tells a story of he went to this house where he saw a poor family that had nothing left but like a bowl of rice. And a god came down in human form and said, I I'm hungry, feed me. And the family gave them the bowl of rice and had nothing left. And they were like on the pangs of death. And the god ate the rice and then turns into God and then gives them heaven, right? And so the mongoose rolls around on that ground there and becomes half golden. And when he's rolling around this sacrifice, he sees, oh, it's not. I'm not turning golden. So the idea again is that the hospitality and giving to strangers, anyone that comes to your door, that comes to your step, is like one of the highest values.
That is morality. That is ethics. Right. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be in Aristotle to get it. You can get it from the myth. So, and by the way, Aristotle himself tells us this. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. He brings up. He hasn't even brought up Aristotle yet. Let's let him say that first.
Religion in most of antiquity, especially in Greece and Rome, involved ways of worshiping the gods.
Yeah.
The gods wanted to be recognized for who they were. They wanted people to pray to them. They wanted people to give them gifts. And in exchange, the gods would help people, which is, pretty much what Christians think today. You live in ways that God will be pleased with. So God will help you in one way or another. And that was the ancient religions as well. But ethics was not a part of it for the most part.
If you're going to say that and then end it with, for the most part, you're going to have to explain yourself here, dude. Because ethics is part of it for the most part. It's the exact opposite. Ethics is part of this stuff for the most part. They have codes. Some of them have dress codes. Some of them have specific ways of doing their offerings, and there's reasons for it. Pythagoreans offered vegetables because they didn't believe in meat. They didn't believe in sacrifice of meat. That was a Pythagorean innovation. A lot of these other groups didn't really care. They sacrificed meat, they sacrificed oxen, they sacrificed goats and sheep, whatever. But as Pythagoreans had a moral code about their religious system, about how they sacrifice. They gave up cake offerings, which is something you also find in the Old Testament, which a lot of scholars in the Copenhagen side think that the cake offerings in the Old Testament was like borrowing from the Pythagoreans, the monist, which maybe, I don't know. I'm just saying it's one of the ideas out there. By the way, is there cake offerings in the Far East?
Yeah, I mean, they're called cakes. I mean, but again, it's the translation, they call it cakes. But it is kind of like a cake kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a vegetable offering. That's what it is.
Well, it could be, or grain. So it's like a grain that's made into a cake, and maybe like,
and then you put it off. You sacrifice. You literally light it on fire like you're going to do a sacrifice. So you're just taking, instead of an animal, you just replace it with a veg. It's basically vegetarian sacrifices.
Right. So it's interesting because that's how the Vedic sacrifices changed. And the Brahmana texts talk about this too, saying, we have this general principle that, ahimsa is the highest. It's non-violence is the highest thing. But to kill these animals, what if we have substitutions? And they came up with this idea of substitutions, where now you use vegetables and fruits and these rice cakes and instead, right?
And so he doesn't bring up the Delphic maxims that are on the Temple of Apollo. He doesn't talk about any of that stuff. He just asserts it. Let's see if he backs it up.
In both Greek and Roman religions, the gods were not overly concerned about how you lived. There were some things they didn't like. There's some things they didn't appreciate.
They're 100% concerned about how you live.
Do I even have to refute this? Like, is this so ridiculous? The gods didn't care about how you lived? Oh my God! What is he talking about?
How do you get to Hades, or how do you get to the Elysian fields, or these are actions and how
he wanted you to be an initiate. Exactly. You needed to be initiate first of all, and then once you're initiate, you learn the maxims, you learn the codes, you learn the ways of doing things, you learn how to do things, you learn life, you learn about family, you learn about oh my God, I can't believe he just said that. Let's see if we're just waiting. Yeah.
But by and large, what you did with your daily life, even things that human culture would condemn, the gods often didn't really care about. They didn't care if you stole your neighbor's lamp, or you slept with your neighbor's spouse, or you cheated on your tax.
Okay, so I don't know if he thinks paganism is like this one thing. Like, how most like Christian apologists think paganism is this one religion where there's a bunch of people with hoods on, trying to with pentagrams tattooed on their face, sacrificing black goats, and then the gods don't care what we do. We do what we want. I thought in the beginning of this video when he said, I used to think that, but now I don't. He's totally reverted back to the way he thinks pagans are. He just literally made the claim that gods don't care what people do.
That is insane to me. I mean, I think it's one of the most, it shows a level, again, you're out of your wheelhouse, brother. Like, Dr. Ehrman, like talk about Christianity all day under the sun, but don't talk about these other traditions where you don't know what they practice. You don't know how they practice. And it seems clearly you don't know what they thought and taught. It's fascinating because like the Greek myths talk about, I forget who Zeus, like Sisyphus or the guy who ate his own children, he's going to drown. And there are clearly rules within the Greek mythology for how people get into these different locations and what the values of that tradition are. I mean, and it's very clear in like Buddhism and Hinduism, the same thing. How do you live your life? Are you feeding the poor? Are you taking care of your family? Are you doing your duties? Are you contributing to society? And these are all important elements of how you live that reflects on where you go and what, like, I mean, our very concept of karma comes with the word kra, which means action. So the action determines where you go.
Yeah. And we already brought up how the gods wanted you to be pious and how they wanted you to give good hospitality. And what happens when you didn't give good hospitality? They destroyed your entire, they wiped you out. And if you did give, like, we already established that one. But like, I don't think Bart understands that the philosophers, the Pythagoreans, the Platonists, the Eleatic school, the Stoic school, these are all religious sects with their own views on God and their own maxims and their own set of standards. And they all had these, like, I'm looking through this Pythagorean sentences of Heracles, is a different author. And it says, like, nor must we admit to observe that though the gods are not the causes of evil, yet they connect certain persons with things of this kind and surround those who deserve to be afflicted with corporal and external hindrances, not through any malignity or because they think it's advisable that men should struggle with difficulties, but for the sake of punishment. For as a general pestilence and drought, rainstorms, earthquakes, and the like are indeed most produced by natural causes, yet they are sometimes caused by the gods when the times are such that the multitude's iniquity needs to be punished publicly and in common. Likewise, the gods sometimes inflict an individual with corporal and external difficulties in order to punish and convert others to what is right. That is from Heracles, 2nd century BC source, where he's talking about what the gods are. The gods cause things to happen if you don't do their will. Right. So what do you mean the gods don't want you to do things? How is this any different from the Jewish God who sends plagues to Moses because he wants Pharaoh, because he wants Pharaoh to do something? Right. There's literally no difference here between the Jewish God and what he wants to be done and any other God written about in any of these sources.
Right. Like, for example, heroic valor. How do you fight in a battle? How do you fight an opponent? Those are ethical values that, like, we don't think that much about because we don't have to deal with war at a regular basis and skirmishes. But in that world, they did. So what do they have? Values of when someone oppresses you, you fight back. How do you fight back? You don't run away. There's these different rules of battle and rules of war for the purposes of showing your moral character.
Yeah. Here's another one. The Golden Verses of Pythagoras, a manuscript from Alexandria. First, honor the immortal gods as the law demands. Then reverence thy oath. And then illustrate illustrious heroes. Then venerate the divinities under earth. Do rites performing. Then honor your parents and all your kindred. Among others, make the most virtuous thy friend. Love to make use of soft speeches and learn from this deeds that are useful, but alienate not the beloved comrade for trifling offenses. Bear all you can, what you can, for power is bound to necessity. Never forget that death is appointed to all, that possessions here are gladly gathered, here must be left. Whatever sorrow the fate of the gods may here send us, bear. Whatever may strike you, with patience, unmurmuring. To relieve it, as far as you can, is permitted. But reflect that not much misfortune has fate given to the good. The speech of the people is various, now good and now evil. So let them not frighten you, and so forth. Like these are verses or law codes related to the gods. Like, I don't know how more clear do we have to get here. The Stoics, everyone thinks the Stoicism is just a philosophy. No, the Stoics believed in what they called Zeus, who they called the Logos, the word. And they thought that Zeus had a set of laws that he wanted people to follow. You can read the Stoic philosophers like Seneca, and they talk about this stuff. They believed the gods wanted you to act a certain way. They wanted ethics. He didn't even bring up any of this stuff. He never brought up the Stoics, the Pythagoreans, the Platonists. All he keeps talking about is pagans, is one big group. It's a sign of a very sophomoric or rookie scholar when they talk like this. When they can't get specific, if you can't get specific about who you're talking about, what period of time, and you just say Greco-Roman pagans, well, then why am I listening to you? This is amateur hour right now. Greco-Roman pagans. When? From 500 BC to 500 AD, Greco-Roman pagans lived everywhere. What are you talking about when you say Greco-Roman pagans? Are you talking about in the Augustan period? Are you talking about the Samothracian mysteries? Are you talking about the Stoics that lived in Athens? Are you talking about Alexandrian, the cult of Ptolemy? Are you talking about the Phrygians under the Attalid dynasty? What are you talking about? You talking about the Seleucid Empire religion? There's a whole different cult over there too. What are you talking about when you say Greco-Roman religion and you talk this vaguely about it? And you're wrong. I knew I was going to get all worked up, man. I knew.
Well, this is a fair point. I mean, this is he's glossing over it. It's as if, go ahead.
I'm glad you're here to keep me sane. All right, let's keep going.
Taxes or whatever you did, you were a nasty person. As long as you're worshiping the gods were pretty much okay with it. The one big difference is going to be that with Christianity, ethics matter to the religion, and Christians are getting that from Judaism.
Let's repeat that. Let's go back 5 seconds. This is just so good.
You were a nasty person. As long as you're worshiping the gods,
let me just go back a little more than that.
With your neighbor's spouse, or you stole your neighbor's lamp, or you slept with your neighbor's spouse, or you cheated on your taxes, or whatever you did.
No one cares.
You were a nasty person. As long as you're worshiping the gods are pretty much okay with it.
I don't care.
So one big difference is going to be that
the Christians,
Christianity, ethics matter to the religion.
Ooh.
And Christians are getting that from Judaism.
Getting it from the Judaism,
where that was also the case.
They're getting it from Judaism, not the Greeks language that they speak. Christians, a predominantly Greek-speaking religion, mostly from the 2nd century onward. Because let's be real, 1st century Christianity is tiny. And we don't have any Hebrew sources from when they were Jews. All we know is post-Paul, who's writing to people in Greece, in Alexandria, in Syria, or whatever, in Phrygia. We don't know what they were getting there from the Jewish, but we know that there's Greek-speaking Christians living in Greek cities, and they're going to follow the culture that they live in. Correct. So they might be reading Philo of Alexandria. They're Greeks. Most of these people don't know Hebrew, right? They're living in Ephesus, or you're living in Philippi, or living in wherever. You're Greek, and so why would you just assume all of it's coming from the Jews? Just asserts that none of it's coming from the Middle Platonists, Philo. So that's another thing. This is shocking to me that he has no idea how much Philo, I guess, okay, Philo's a Jew. I get, all right, fine, fair enough. Philo's a Jew. But Philo himself is citing Plato. Let me show you this section. Let me see if I got my Philo over here somewhere. Oh, my Philo's over there. Do you want to comment on this? I'm going to grab something real quick.
Yeah, about this, the nature that he's talking about. I forgot my train of thought for a second.
He said,
what did he say there?
He said, word for word, he says, in paganism, which is a very broad subject, in Greco-Roman paganism, it didn't matter. The gods didn't care what you did. As long as you worshiped them, everything was fine.
Yeah.
Christianity, on the other hand, ethics matters.
Oh,
And they got that from the Jews, as if the Jews are some different group, some special category over in the Mediterranean that separated themselves with a big force field around them, and there's nothing Mediterranean about them. They're totally different, right?
Yeah, I mean, this entire train of thought, I think, is, again, it goes back to the point we're making earlier, which is ethics and morality are built into the nature of almost every single religion in the world. And you cannot say that Christians were worried about ethics, the Greeks were not worried about ethics. It doesn't make sense to me. You could say that they had different ethical values, that Christians, like you said earlier, prioritize some things over the others, which I think is absolutely fair if you wanted to take that position. But you cannot say that the idea of ethics is unheard of or unimportant to a regular Greek, Roman, Indian at that time. It was very much important. You have to look at these texts and tradition. By the way, we know far less about the ancient Greeks and their practices than we do about the Christians, because these mystery cults, a lot of their texts were lost. These practices died. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're good, man. I'm loving that. So this is what Philo, a Jew from the 1st century,
right?
So he goes, they get it from the Jews, right? They don't get they don't get anything from the pagans, right? Philo, this is what Philo says. Philo has to beg to differ with Bart here. Number 1, he says, Democritus and Epicurus and the principal numbers of the Stoic philosophers affirm that creation and destructibility of the world, though they do not all speak in similar senses, for some give a sketch of many worlds, the generation of which they attribute to the course of combination of atoms, and their destruction they impute of dissolution. The Stoics speak of one world only, and they affirm God is the cause of its creation, but that cause of its corruption is no longer God. Aristotle, I'm skipping ahead, Aristotle, with a knowledge as to what I know, not to what degree, I may call it holy and pious. What? I might call it holy and pious, affirmed that the world was uncreated and indestructible, and he accused those who maintained a contrary opinion of terrible impiety for thinking that a visible God was in no respect different from the things made with his hands. Skip ahead a little bit. He says, the Pythagoreans and this doctrine, but some of the Pythagoreans. But I have met the work on Ocelus, a Lucanian, by birth, entitled A Treatise on the Nature of the Universe. I had this text, by the way, in which he has not only asserted that the world is indestructible, but he has even devoured to prove by demonstrable proofs. Plato in the Timaeus to be uncreated and indestructible in the accounts of the divine assembly, in which the younger gods are addressed by the eldest, and the governor of them all in the following terms: O ye gods of gods, those works of which I am father and creator, and are indissoluble as long as I choose that they shall be. So here's what you get from, and then he goes, but some people think the father of Platonic theory was the poet Hesiod, as they conceived the world was spoken of him as being created and indestructible, and created when he says, first did chaos rule, then did broad-chested Gaia was first to light, foundation firm and lasting whatever exists among mankind. He cites Democritus, Epicurus, the Stoics. He cites the Pythagoreans. He cites Aristotle. He cites Plato. He cites Hesiod. Then later on, he starts talking about the gods, the pagan gods. This is a Jew. This is a Christian or a pre-Christian Greek writing Jew, citing the pagan gods. He talks about Bacchus giving gifts to mankind. He says that Mercury, swift-footed Mercury, delivered the messages in such a way like an angel. He compares them to the Logos. He's talking about the great things that the twins the Dioscuri twins did. Apollo, the attributes of Apollo, the greatest assemblies of his characteristics. He wears a crown emitting rays. And then he says the caduceus of the herald's wand, Mercury, endeavoring, to receive their respites. And anyways, the point is, I can go on and on and on. He's giving a positive spin on the things that gods bring to them and how we should pay attention to these things because they're good. That's Judaism in the first century.
Mm-hmm.
But notice how Bart has this divinity school mindset, this theological THD mindset, paganism. No, that ethics doesn't count. Judaism, ethics, great. Christians borrow from the Jews. Notice how he split that up like that. It's so crazy to me that you can just get away with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not being checked on that, but that's okay.
It's okay, right?
I mean, that's okay for the purposes. I mean, he's not on any of our channels or talking.
No, he's giving me content though. You're right.
Yeah,
so it is okay. You're right. It's a good point. But yeah, let's keep going.
So, would you say that was mainly maybe the most significant difference between pagan ethics, morals, and what we see in ancient Judaism? I'm
sorry, but when I hear that pagan morals and ethics versus Judeo-Christian,
which pagan?
What is that exactly? What do you mean by that? Like,
yeah,
sorry, but that's just, oh my God, it's nails on the chalkboard when I hear that. Okay, let's go.
Is linked to the practice of their religion.
And real quick, because really what they're saying is anything outside of Judaism and Christianity. And that can mean a million different things to a million different people in a million different cities in a million different years. Like, depending on what city you're in, depending on what year you're in, there's a whole different thing going on with these people. So I just don't know what they mean by this, with these broad stroke. This is the stuff you get with like Graham Hancock or What If All His, these broad stroke opinions on history where they just swipe over 500 years like it's nothing, 500 miles of territory, all the same. Anyways,
it's obviously one of the big issues in Judaism, going back to the Hebrew Bible, the 10 Commandments. When you look at the 10 Commandments, there are some commandments about how to worship God. You shall have no other.
What's the difference between that and the Pythagorean sentences? What's the difference between that and the Delphic maxims? What's the difference between that and the Augustine reforms and the 12 tables? What are you
Christian,
doing?
That's why it's different. It's explicitly stated.
It's the 12. It's the 10 Commandments. They tell you how to worship God. That's moral. The other ones didn't do that.
Yeah.
Holy shit. And we've already demonstrated that. I'm glad I got these out of the way. I've already read this to people. All the Delphic maxims, the Pythagorean sentences, the golden verses, Plato's laws, by the way. Plato's laws. I'm constantly bringing up the gods and the one. What's the difference between that and the 10 Commandments?
I don't think there's anything.
Can you even try to steelman that question? I don't think you can.
The only thing you could say is the 10 Commandments, if anything. And by the way, I haven't read those texts, so I can't really say, but maybe this is given as rules and laws that are to be absolutely followed by a group of people. And therefore, it's like ethical framework for personal morality is all I can think about. That's how I would argue that position. Because I don't know what the other side, these other texts are saying, right?
Yeah.
I could take it clearly from the Indic perspective, which is, we do have all these different principles, we call them, but they're not necessarily rules like the commandments, the same way commandments we have in the 10 Commandments. They're because you have to use them within context driven.
Yeah.
So
principles that guide your life. He also completely ignores Egypt as a place.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about Greco-Roman religion. Let's just not talk about Egypt, which has the 42 ideals of Mott. They're like, I've done this, I've done that. They're more positive than negative. It's not don't do this. It's more I've done this. But still, you have a law code of the gods. That's not Jewish. It's Egyptian. Right. It's technically pagan under your definition of paganism. But here, check this out. Here we go. It's another source from the 4th century BCE from Aristoxenus of Tarentum, latter half of the 4th century BCE, student of Aristotle, in his Apathygems writes, after divinity and divine spirits, the greatest respect should be paid to parents and laws, not fictitiously, but in reality, preparing ourselves to an observance of and perseverance of manners and laws of our country, though they should be in a small degree worse than those of other countries. But after these things follows, which should be paid to the living parents, it being right to discharge the first, the greatest, and most ancient of debts. Everyone likewise should think that all in which he possesses belongs to those who begot and nurtured him, in order that he may be ministrant to their want to the utmost of his ability, beginning from his property in the second place, discharging his debts to them from things pertaining to his body, and in third place, from things pertaining to his soul. Thus, with usury, repairing the cares and the pains which is now very aged parents bestow on him when he was young. And it says, by always acting and living in this matter, we shall each be rewarded according to our deserts by both the gods and those natures that are superior to us, and shall pass the greatest part of our life in a good hope. That's from the 4th century BCE. It's about the gods. It's about morality. It's about ethics. It's about codes of conduct. Do I need to say more?
I don't think we do, but I mean, again, this is, I mean, I part of me is like, I want to give the dude the benefit of the doubt until the book comes out and I read it, and maybe he addresses these points and is better at it, and he's better at writing books than he is at in these interviews. But
oh man, I can't wait to see what sources he's gotten there.
Yeah,
because these aren't disappearing. That's for sure. No matter what he says in his book, to try to finagle out of the Greeks didn't have morality in with their gods.
Or the ethics. They didn't have ethics.
Yeah. And like the fact that I just read like 10 of them, 10 different primary sources relating to the gods and worship and codes of ethics. Quoting from Aristotle's Ethics. I didn't even get to Parmenides yet. I had his book Waiting in the Winds. There's a book from Peter Kingsley called In Dark Places of Wisdom. And it's not even a scholarly book, but he is a scholar. But this shows you the Eleatic school of Parmenides, set up in southern Italy, right next to the Pythagorean school, which very much had moral codes, religious, strict religious codes about how to do things, how to build your temples, how to do certain incubation rituals, how to do sacrifice, how to heal. All of that's in here.
Yeah, the question was, where do we find? So even if we take at some level, like, let's just address this part. Even if we assume that he's right, that religion, ethics are separate, and Christianity came up with ethical system while Greeks didn't, at least the Greek religions didn't, then where does the philosophies that we talk about, Stoicism or these are religious. No, I know, but let's just say they're philosophies and not religions, right?
Okay.
So where do they come from? Do they appear out of thin air again?
They just these philosophers just sat there thinking, like the statue of the philosopher going like this.
Right.
They just sat there and then it just popped out of their brains out of nowhere.
Why don't we have that similar kind of thought process occurring in, let's say, the Jewish text, or maybe you do in the Talmud? I mean, I don't know. I haven't read enough of the Jewish thought. Was there in that period of time, did they have a philosophy? Did they develop this kind of thinking, or were they very legalistic in that sense? Because then Christianity is going to be the legalism of the Jewish traditions with the philosophy and ideas of the quote unquote pagan traditions.
Right.
So if anything, the best thing Ehrman should say is philosophy is a subset of the religious practices of this community, of these people. It's not like a separate freaking thing that's out here.
Right.
It's part and parcel of the religious framework.
Yeah, and the way their sects are, the way the philosophical sects are, whether you're Stoic, Pythagorean, Eleatic school, whatever it is, they operate no different than like a Christian denomination would. No. They have a view on God, a dogma. The Stoics are very dogmatic. Arete is the highest virtue. God is called Zeus, and he's the Logos. Those are dogmas of the Stoics. The Stoics weren't just random philosophers that could think whatever they want about God. They had a set of dogmas they had to follow to be a Stoic. But even beyond the philosophers, Eleusinian mysteries, for example, this is not a philosophical sect. This is a religious mystery cult near Athens, in the greater Athens area, south of Athens. And they had, the festival was called Thesmophoria. You know what that means in Greek? It means lawgiver. Demeter's role in the myth, and I'm not just using that as an equivocation, a word fallacy. There's a reason why. Because in the myth of Demeter, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, she wanders around the world weeping over her Persephone's being taken down to the underworld. And then when she drinks the Koukeon, and then Zeus tells her that Persephone will return, then she is happy and she rejoices, and then she brings the laws to the people of Eleusis, Triptolemus, her prophet, and she sets up her temple, she sets up her rituals, and there's a law code there that they follow. The Eumolpidae clan is called. It's like the Levites. Right. So the way to think about it, if you only know the Bible, you don't know mythology, the Eumolpid clan are the Levites. They are the chosen priestly class that are set up to run the temple of Demeter. And they have prescribed laws given by Demeter herself. And their festival of Thesmophoria, oddly enough, was during the same week that the Sukkot festival was, which is also another festival commemorating Moses giving the law to the Israelites. Just happens to be that way. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. But I'm just pointing out there, this idea of law-giving gods does not have to be philosophical either. It's in the primary sources about specific cults. I just named Eleusinian. The Samothracian mysteries on the island of Samothrace had a similar origin story where the great gods of the Samothracians give the laws to, I think it's Orpheus, actually, in that particular case. But it's been a while since I read that one. The point is, in all these mystery cults, they have a very similar setup. Prophet gets the laws, he brings them to the people, they set up a temple, and then everything goes on from there. But they have laws and they have restrictions. They have dietary restrictions. Pythagoreans don't eat beans for whatever reason. Different places, different dietary restrictions. This is not a Jewish thing. Judaism is following the norm that everyone else is following in the Mediterranean world. They all have their own version of this. They'll have local ancestral cults, just like Yahwism. So it's fascinating.
And this is interesting too, because again, here's an ethical point. Why didn't the Pythagoreans eat meat?
Right. It's ethical. Exactly. There's no way around that. There's an ethical reason. They also don't eat beans too. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, but that comes from like the Jains will not eat meat, nor will they eat potatoes or onions or garlic, because they think it comes from the earth, the bottom of the earth, like it's in the womb. So,
it says right here. Aristotle says in his work on the Pythagoreans, they enjoyed abstention from beans, either because they look like genitals, or because they are from the gates of Hades, or because they are destructive. And he's basically giving off a bunch of reasons why he thinks they don't do it. Right. But anyways, the point is we know that they, for some reason, didn't do it. Porphyry writes about the Pythagoreans that do not step over a balance, do not be covetous, do not poke a fire with a sword, do not pluck a crown, do not eat hearts, do not sit on the corn ration, don't receive swallows in your house, don't carry images of gods on your rings. These are all Pythagorean laws that our Porphyry is telling us about. So like this, it's so funny to me that they don't know this. Why would you speak so clear? Why would you went and write a book on something you have no idea what it is? It blows my mind. It blows my mind. You write a whole book about something, you have no idea what you're talking about. So I'll keep going.
the gods before me. You shall not make a graven image. These are issues related to worship, but there are other things that are involved with communal life. You should not murder. You should not commit adultery. You should not bear false witness. These are not aspects of worship so much as how you behave in community. And these were just as divinely given. These laws were just as divinely given, the ones about ethics and morality, as the ones about worship. And so that was a distinctive thing for Judaism, but it wasn't the only distinctive thing about the ethics within Judaism. It certainly made it unlike the religions more broadly throughout the world.
Again, this is
I don't understand what he just said there.
He's saying there's this demarcation where there's laws for the worship, like, for example, no idolatry, worship of God themselves, and which religions have, and then they have this other communal stuff, like
which we've already demonstrated.
Neighbor,
we've already demonstrated in all these sources are already happening in all these other places.
Right.
So
I feel like it's weird.
Doesn't know. He just doesn't know.
I don't think sad. He does.
That's sad that you can be a Bible scholar and go your whole career and not know about the Pythagoreans, not know about the Stoics.
Well, I mean,
that's fucking weird, man. Why don't they even want to read this stuff? I know how many Bible scholars I've met who I'm like, what are your thoughts on this Plato? Never picked him up in my life.
Well,
you've been a Bible scholar for 20 years. You got your PhD in 1996, and you don't even want to read Plato and find out what Plato thinks. Don't you have any curiosity about this stuff? No.
Well, I mean, I guess it's similar to, like, why don't we want to read, maybe the Chinese thought?
I do.
I do. I mean, I'm just saying, like, some scholars, right? Like, will be like, yeah, I'm really in my niche right here, right? Which one's that?
This is the early Taoist scriptures.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Chinese spirituality, fascinating shit. Everyone should be reading through this just for fun, not even to try to, like, be an expert or anything. Just as a fan of religion, you should. I'm into this. I'm into all this stuff. I don't care.
I love this stuff.
African. I did a whole video on African religion. Blew my mind. I love it.
Yeah. There's a great podcast.
The Yoruba religion down in, like, Sudan over there, and that southern south of the Sahara.
Right.
Fascinating culture down there. I love it.
Yeah. Peter Adamson has a great podcast, history of philosophy and in Africa and Asia, and it's really cool stuff. But yeah,
and they have law codes too. they have ethics too, by the way.
Yeah,
everyone does. It goes along with religion.
Well, it's just hand in hand. The human condition, that you put it in a religious context, because that was the earliest way for people to give it authority. You came from somewhere older than you and older than your father's father, and so on, right? So religion gives you that grounding in some sense, that I think, again, this is where Ehrman is out of his wheelhouse, number one. And it's weird to me, again, not weird. I think it's normal. A lot of scholars, they really do focus on what they're really experts at, and they really only tend to care about that.
Fair. Do that. Yeah. Be like that then, and then stay out of. And then when someone asks you a question, for example, one of the first times Dan McClellan really, like, made me go, "What the hell? What the hell is going on with this guy?" Was when he was asked a question on one of his TikTok videos about the Eucharist and Dionysus being eaten ritually.
Yeah,
and the guy was right. It's called the Amphalgos, or the what is it? How do you say it? Amphalgos, Dionysus.
Ampholios? Is that
Ampholios? No, when they eat the flesh.
Yeah, is it from the navel? Because sorry,
I don't know. I forgot what the word is. Eating Dionysus. Oh, Amphagia.
Okay.
So he asked this guy. I think he even used this word, Amphagia, and he asked him, like, what are your thoughts on the Eucharist of eating the body of Christ and the Amphagia of eating the flesh of Dionysus and the cults of Dionysus? He completely acted like this was all made up. Like, look at this. Look at, like, here, like, this is an actual Harvard studies classical philology. Amphagia is a large element in Dionysius myth. In fact, Dionysus epithet's a raw eater, right? And this is like the Dionysus fast is eating raw meat as part of their worship, And look at the God who comes from Greek Manism, Harvard studies. This is well cited. You can actually find good sources on Wikipedia if you know how to use it.
Yeah.
And like the Titans and the act of the Sparagmos. So the guy was asking a really good question. And by the way, he went to the wrong source. He asked Dan this question. There's tons of academic papers on this particular topic, comparing the Eucharist to the Orphic Omphagia. And Dan completely acted like this was all made up zeitgeist nonsense. And I just remember going, whoa, that was crazy. I didn't know I thought this guy was a good scholar. That was one of the first times I ever mentioned it. The point is going back to Bart. Why do they even bother putting their making stances on things if they just don't know? Just say, I don't know. And he did it on the Danny Jones podcast. What do you thought on the Hilaria Festival? Oh, Hilaria, I'm familiar with that festival, but it's been a while. Why don't you just say, I don't know? Why do you pretend to be an expert in everything? It looks
right. And this is the thing. It's like, again, when you go to the ancient past, like I'm sure most Greeks and Romans knew about this Omphalia. They knew it probably like it's everywhere. But my guess is scholars today, because we don't have a lot of sources from that time period, don't know about it enough. So they don't know that, they can't see that maybe that is connected to the Eucharist, where you eat the blood of Jesus using the symbol of the wafer or drink the blood of Jesus and the flesh of Jesus, right?
And it's not like I'm not expecting you to say that. I'm not expecting you to go, they copied it from the pagans. No, I'm asking for a nice nuanced response. Either give a nuanced response, either cite some academia, or just don't talk about it, or just skip that question. That's all I'm asking. Give the nuance. Where's the nuance at? And this video has been no nuance. It's been here. Christians do this, and they care about ethics, and these people don't. That's just zero nuance here at all. So
we're only 11 minutes into this video.
I know we're doing horrible. All right, let's get going. All right.
What would you say were some of the other distinctive elements of Judaic ethics?
Well, there are some specifics. There are a lot of specifics that make Jews stand out, but there are also there are kind of broader issues involved in ancient Greek thought. Something we'll be talking about probably at greater length is
whenever you hear a Bible scholar say in ancient Greek thoughts, get ready for some bullshit to follow. Let's hear it. I don't even remember this part, to be honest. We'll see.
That there absolutely was the idea that you should help people who are in need.
Okay.
But the people you should help.
That's not an ancient Greek thought. That's in every ancient thought, by the way. But okay, let's go.
They wouldn't put it this way, but this is how we would put it. The people you help are those who are either biologically or socially related to you. In other words,
no! That's the whole point. That's the whole point of Xenia. Oh my God. I'm going to slam my fucking thing, dude. I'm going to break this whole computer right now. That's the entire point of the Xenia, was the idea that a stranger will come to you and you should feed them and clothe them. It's the biggest, it's one of the biggest virtues in Greek thought, if we're going to fucking use that term.
Right.
Let me just make sure I didn't get them out of context there.
Where but the people is that in ancient Greek thought, something we'll be talking about probably at greater length is that there absolutely was the idea that you should help people who are in need. But the people you should help, they wouldn't put it this way, but this is how we would put it. The people you help are those who are either biologically or socially related to you. In other words, you help out your family and your friends and your larger community, probably in that order.
Let's see what this word means. Xenia is an ancient Greek hospitality. I know I'm reading Wikipedia, but if you don't fucking know about Xenia, then don't talk about the Greeks ever. This is the number one thing that the Greeks hold this on the pedestal. This is the highest virtue of all time, Xenia. And it says in the always translated as guest friendship or ritualized friendship. It is institutionalized. Yeah.
Just this part right here. Hospitality towards foreign Hellenes honored Zeus, Xenios, and Athena, Xenia, patrons of foreigners.
That's what I was gonna get there. The word itself means stranger. It doesn't mean family or fellow Greek. Zeus, Xenios, is the god of foreigners. You cannot be even he's saying he's giving you the exact opposite of Greek thought. He's saying, I'm going to give you the exact opposite of Greek thought. I'm going to make them look like a bunch of assholes. They only care about themselves. Christians care about strangers. No, dude. That's the Greeks. That's the pagans. According to your pagan definition, that's them. Like, look at this. Look at this. Everyone knows the story about Philemon and Bacchus. Did Philemon and Bacchus think that these were family? You know what the point of the story was? The point of the story was they had no idea who these strangers were, and they let them in their house, and they gave them their last bottle of wine, and they fed them the last bit of bread and food they had. And that's what it was. Plato describes 4 types of xenoi, or strangers in need of hosting, in his laws. This is the epitome of Greek thought, Plato. The first and inevitable immigrant is one who chooses summer as a rule for his annual visits, in the fashion of migratory birds, and like birds, and most of these cross the sea, just as if they had wings, for the sake of making gain by their trading and flying over to the cities. This stranger must be received when he comes to a city. Hey, Bart, what does this say? This stranger must be received when he comes to the city. The second type of stranger is the inspector, in a literal sense, with his eyes and his ears and blah, 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 blah. Such must be lodgings provided at the temples to afford them friendly accommodation. The third type requires a public reception, as he who comes from another country, not family, not your friends, another country. On some public business, he must be received by none but the generals, hipparchs. I hope Bart redoes his book if someone sends him this. I hope he goes, fuck, I got to redo my book now. The fourth stranger comes rarely, if ever, or drop the book. Let me fucking do a review on it then. I hope you do drop it. That's good content for me. Anyways, you get the point. I don't got to keep going. Let's go back to what he says about this. This is so crazy. Watch him say the exact opposite of what we just read. Ready?
Mm-hmm. But the people you should help, they wouldn't put it this way, but this is how we would put it. The people you help are those who are either biologically or socially related to you. In other words, you help out your family and your friends and your larger community, probably in that order, and in the Greek and Roman worlds. But outsiders were not a concern for you. If a stranger, unless the stranger was a potential.
He just used the word stranger. Does he not know what xenia means? We just read the opposite. He doesn't know what stranger. He doesn't know what xenia is. This is breaking news. Bart Ehrman, a religion scholar, doesn't know what xenia is. One of the biggest concepts in all of Greek thought. Xenia. He doesn't even know what it is. Never heard of it. Never even ran into it before, because he never would have said that. He never would have said that. This is crazy. This is so amateurish that I'm shocked that this is the person who gets all these book deals and gets to do all these courses that people buy for $60, $69.99. This is the guy. This is the guy everyone goes to talk about mythicism or whatever the fuck they want. Bart Ehrman says the guy who doesn't even know what xenia is.
Potential friend. You know, the stranger was somebody who maybe was on your same socioeconomic class, with the same kind of values and things. They come to town, but you recognize they're also like a rich fellow.
How would you know their values?
Then you could befriend them.
Right.
But people who are in need, who are outside.
Denver, he just says they're on the same level as you. What did we just read? We just read there are 4 different types of strangers. All of them should be received. Did it not say that?
It did. It said that.
Okay. I know this is crazy, right? By the way, I want to show a post. I just happened to post this earlier, and it just happens to be like running into what he's saying. Besides my dog, I wrote this is from Athenian from the 5th century, early 4th century BCE. He writes, and this is before the Hellenistic period, by the way, before Alexander the Great's conquest. And this was in a speech. He says, "And so far our city Athens distance the rest of mankind in thought and speech, that her pupils have become the teachers of the rest of the world. And she has brought it about the name Hellenes, suggests no longer a race, but an intelligence, that the title Hellenes is applied rather to those who share our culture than those who share a common blood." You can see the Greeks care about culture more than they care about actual like not to say they don't care about bloodlines, they do, but they want people to be Hellenistic. They want you to join. They want you to be a Hellenized friend of the Greeks. They're looking for friends. They're looking for strangers. You know what I mean? There's a big, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean they care about their ancestors. Of course they fucking do. Of course they do. That's not, I would never say that about the Greeks, but I'm saying you can have both. You can be friendly to your neighbors and you can also care about your ancestors. That's one of the things Greeks did. And Bart is not doing a good job. He gets an F at how he's portraying the Greeks right now. An F.
Yeah. I mean, similarly in the Vedic texts, you have Krinvanto Vishwamariam, right? This make the whole world Arya, right? This whole idea that all beings are to be part of the same like community, right? And you know, Arya in this sense means noble, but this noble community, which is one of the great things about the idea of the Vedic syncretism, right? And when you think about Hinduism and how it grew, it was synchronizing, bringing other people in, the traditions in, integrating them. That's the nature of that ethical value, which clearly Ehrman thinks is not it's Christian only, apparently.
Thinks the Christians were the first people to care about other people other than their own
people.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is so funny though, because he said earlier in the video, they got this from the Jews. Are the Jews really the ones that are looking out for everyone else besides themselves? I'm not saying they don't. I'm not saying they're completely against the foreigner, but they're not. This is not the person I would use as the example of people worrying about their, they're very much in-house, our temple, our land, especially the Maccabean period. Maybe before that, it'd be different. It'd be more of a, but like when you get in the Maccabean period, they're kicking the Greeks, they're kicking Antiochus out, they're kicking Ptolemy out. They're taking care of their own. That's what the Hebrews are doing that. That's not the example I would use, that the Greeks are, the Jews or the Christians are borrowing this idea of caring about strangers from the Jews. No, they're getting that from the Greeks, the xenia concept.
Yep. That's right.
Were not a concern. And often explicitly this is stated in our sources. Wait.
Look at this. In our sources. What, are you going to show one? I hate when people say that.
With the same kind of values and things, they come to town, but you recognize they're also like a rich fellow like you are. Then you could befriend them. But people who are in need, who are outsiders, were not a concern. And often explicitly this is stated in our sources.
It's as often explicitly stated in our sources that Greeks did not care about strangers outside of them.
I would love to see what that source is.
Exactly. Why you're just going to say that? You're just going to assert that this is in our sources? I've showed sources. I can show you sources.
I just want to hear, like, just tell me, like, where is it written in? And,
give me one person that says the Greeks don't care about strangers, because that goes against the entire concept of the xenia, the highest level of virtue of the Greeks. And they still act this way. Go to Athens right now. They love strangers. They love feeding people from America. The Greeks are still the same way today as they were back in these times.
In the ancient Israelite community, one of the dictates of the law of Moses, Leviticus 19:18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
True.
And in that verse, Leviticus 19:18, it's quite clear that your neighbor means any fellow Israelite.
Every fellow Israelite.
And so it doesn't matter whether you know them or not. It doesn't matter if it's part of your family. It doesn't matter if they...
Any fellow Israelite. Any fellow Israelite. So how does that differ from what you just said about Greeks?
It doesn't.
By the way, I will say this, though. I don't think it's fair to say that the Jews are only caring about Israelites. I do think there is some evidence that they did actually care about foreigners in their land.
Well, I think he talks about that next.
Right. But that is not something that they're only doing by themselves.
Right. It's not unique
to them. Everywhere you go in the Mediterranean. This is the Mediterranean world. Everyone acted this way. Yeah. So, and in fact, like I said earlier, I think the last person you use as an example is the Jews, especially in the Maccabean period. They start to become more restricted in access to their culture eventually. So between 150 BC and 70 AD, you should not be pointing to them as the example of where Christians are getting this idea from. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. I'm just throwing that out there of my own kind of read on this. I'm not really going to die on that hill, but I do think The Greeks are a better example of taking care of strangers than the Jews are. Just saying.
Well, I would probably agree.
Yeah.
A fellow Israelite needs to be treated as you treat yourself. And the other part of that, which is especially interesting, is that if somebody immigrated into Israel and decided to live in Israel, they were to be treated like Israelites. So,
Bart, what is that different from any other Greek civilization in Athens or in Phrygia or in Egypt or in the Ptolemies? The Ptolemies were letting the Jews live there and letting them, they're translating their sources and like, I don't know what is going on here that you think this is special, that the Israelites have a special claim on a Greek word. Xenia is a Greek word. Let's be real now. How are you giving the Jews the claim on this? This is nonsense.
I also think this is like what all humans, I mean, most humans in a complex world where they have neighbors are all foreigners, are going to do.
Yeah, this was the way of the land. You wanted to keep the peace. And by the way, the reason why this is so obviously true is because when you travel, you want this to be the case for you.
Right.
It's a give and take thing. If you're a Greek traveling to Judea, you want the Judeans to take care of you while you're there. If you're a Judean traveling to Greece, which they did, there's many Jews living in Greek cities, and they were treated good. This is the way the Greeks are.
Well, it's just like the law of messengers, right? You don't kill a messenger because you want to send messengers to people. You don't want them killed. And so you respect that. It's a law of prisoners too. It's just simple, right?
Yeah. Let me see one more thing. I found an epigram. This is a Latin epigram. So the Romans, by the way, too.
Do you want to do some of your super chats? People have been waiting for that too.
Oh yeah, I'll do a couple. This is from Martial's epigrams. So this is about Saturnalia. This is the Latin side. We're getting out of the Greek side.
Yeah.
Martial says, "Thus accept and wear this constant flower, thus copied out by art. It blooms in nature, but it's forever in our heart. Affections and habits grown, lives fastened in one. The flower has strengthened into stone. We name forget-me-not." And so I don't know. I guess there's like some sort of catalog of foods giving to departing guests at Saturnalia. This is from Martial's 13 books of the epigram. I'm just reading the note on this. So this is not Greek. This is also Latin. This was a Mediterranean way of life. And the Jews are living in this Mediterranean world with the Latins, with the Carthaginians, with the Egyptians, with the Greeks. This is how everybody was. The way that he's framing this as if this is some sort of Jewish innovation that the Christians borrow from, while the Greeks, meanwhile, didn't give a shit about anyone but themselves. It's not. Right. I actually hope he drops this book like this. I hope he doesn't see this video.
I mean, it's interesting because, like in the Hindu side, there's the saying, Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Atiti Devo Bhava. So your mother is God, father is God, your teacher is God, and the guest is God. So this is why, like, anyone that comes to one's house, to one's place, anybody is served food, drink, water to wash their legs and their body if they're there, and anything else, a seat to sit, a place to sleep.
Exactly. And that is the core of the Indo-European Xenia worldview that you find all across the board. In Persia, Persia's big in hospitality. People would get down and sit on their knees and eat with their hands, and you bring all a spread of food. That's in Persian culture. As you know, Saturnalia, you give gifts to everybody. And by the way, they would reverse the classes for the whole week. The plebs would rise up to the patrician class, and everyone was equal during that week. That is hospitality. Okay, so let's keep going.
So anybody who joined your community from the outside was to have the same rights as you were, as you had, and anybody else had. And so it's an immigration policy that it's explicitly spelled out in Scripture that those who live among you are supposed to have the same rights you have.
Thank you. We're going to take a very brief break, but we'll be back to talk about how morality and ethics.
I'm just disgusted by this video, man. Completely sidesteps Greek sources, pretends they're all one big monolith. First of all, that's the biggest mistake ever. That's the most That's the most amateur shit you're ever going to find. And then 2, to act like they don't care about strangers when their concept of xenia is the central tenet that the only thing unifying all the Greek cults is xenia.
Right, but it's also like I expect more nuance than the way he's talking in this interview. And again, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
No, this is typical Bart Ehrman. He's always, even though he's an atheist and he like doesn't think the Bible's true, he is constantly on the side when it comes to Christianity being a force of good in the world. He is right there. He's a fist in that movement. You can see it. The way he rallies against mythicism or the idea that paganism is influencing Christianity, and like you see right now, how they're so morally better than the pagans were. It's so clearly his own bias seeping through. You can see it. It's not just him. You see this with a lot of people. Religion or History for Atheists does this. I've seen a lot of these like YouTube atheist channels have this sort of mindset. I noticed this. This is a very common thing. For some reason, it makes them think that they're on the side of good. And I know, like, even though I don't believe it, I'm still like on the side of them. Like, and like it's hard to explain, but you can see it. When you see it, it's hard not to notice. All right, I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Now, before the break, we were looking at pagan and Jewish ideas of morality and ethics and kind of what was already in place before Jesus came on the scene. I wanted to kind of finish up that part of the discussion by asking how these ideas about morality and ethics were discussed and then transmitted to other people within the ancient world. Is there like a bulletin board you could read?
If you could read.
Email digest.
Right.
The answer to that is yes. It's called the 12 Tables in the Roman Republic.
And the myths.
So if Bart obviously doesn't know this, but let's pull it up. The 12 Tables, Roman Republic. The 12 Tables were Rome's first legal code, established around 450 BCE. They were a significant step in Roman legal history, moving from unwritten customs to a codified system publicly displayed in the forum. So she had the right,
the bulletin board.
she understands like how this would work, and she's right. By the way, this is from Yale Law School. They have a translation of it. If I can just show you real quick. So this is from the 12 Tables. Or is this a different one? Tradition tells us composed by commission 450 BCE, was ratified by the Centuriate Assembly, who engraved 12 tables, which were attached to a rostra before the curia in the Forum of Rome. Table 1: the plaintiff summons the defendant to the court. The defendant shall go. So it's like if you get called to court, rules. You go. Yeah, legal stuff. Execution of judgment, paternal power. The notably deformed child shall be killed immediately. Wow, that's harsh. To a father shall be given over to the son, power of life and death. A father thrice surrenders for a son. By the way, the Augustan reforms was a lot more compassionate in the first century than these ones were. Augustan reforms were a huge deal. This is old. This is 450 BC. So let's remember, this is the classical period. Some argue it's like the end of the Iron Age still. Like you're still in that old world. Inheritance, though. Women, although they are full of age because of their levity and their mind, should be under guardianship, except the Vestal virgins shall be free from guardianship. The conveyable possessions of a woman who is under guardianship of male agnates, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, the point was there was a code of edicts that was displayed, and here's the sacred law. A dead person shall not be burned, buried, or burned in the city. More than this shall not do. One shall not smooth a funeral pyre with an axe. Expenses of a funeral shall be limited to 3 mourners wearing veils, when one mourner wearing an extensive purple tunic. Ooh. Women shall not tear their cheeks, or shall make a sorrowful outcry on account of a funeral. Anyways, you get
these are just like rules of like customs and things.
This is just a very strict code of conduct on the ground for people to see. When they're
with some legal like procedure and stuff like that too. Yeah.
But then when you get into the Augustine reforms, you start seeing a more family-orientated law code where marriage is advised. Like you get married, you have a child, you have children, and the man takes care of the family and the women cooks. And that was the Augustine reforms. They had that sort of traditional family outlook on life that a lot of Christians end up adopting. Because remember, the Christians are coming out of that.
No, they didn't. They pulled it out of magic. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's
they
right.
Came up there.
Yeah. But the Christians come out of that post-Augustine world where Augustine reforms are the law of the land, and the Christians sort of come out of that world. So you see a lot of the Augustine worldview in Christian circles. But yeah, she had the right idea of asking that question. Let's see what he says.
I think a lot of people have difficulty getting their minds around the idea that you would have a highly ethical society in which ethics were not rooted in religion. For us, for most people, it just doesn't make any sense.
Why does he keep saying this as if it's true? It's so bizarre. We already debunked.
Of course, God's the one who tells you how to behave, right? And so that's where ethics are. And as I said, it wasn't that way in the ancient world, but it doesn't mean they didn't have ethics. They had, as I said, they're just as ethical as we are for the most part, but their ethics were located less in religion than in what we would call philosophy and in kind of
here we go again.
Common sense.
Just repeating
Those are the two major things: communal common sense and philosophy. Philosophers were very interested in how people in society had to behave for the long haul. And their principal interests were, of course, the society itself, but also the individual. How is it that a person can find how can a person live in a way that is satisfying to themselves and good for the community? And so the Greeks had a word for this. It's a Greek word, eudaimonia. Eudaimonia, and it means something like it's very hard to translate into English.
No, it's not.
It's often translated as happiness, but it's not happiness in the way we think of, as a kind of a temporary, fleeting emotion. It's not that you're happy that you had such a good day today, or it's not that you're happy because your team won the Super Bowl.
Contentment.
So eudaimonia or eudaimonia is the he said their anglicized version. It's eudaimonia, and that word in Greek is literally a compound word. Epsilon, upsilon is the prefix that means good or well. Usually means well. Daimonia means spirit or spirited. So it means good spirited. Literally, that's literally what it means. It's not a hard word to translate. If you knew Greek, you would never say that because it's very simple what it is. Look at this. Daimonia. And it actually breaks up. Look at it. It says it right here. The etymology, eudaimonia, is an abstract noun derived from two words, just like I just said, good, and daimon, spirit. So it doesn't mean that they they defined it that way. That's literally what it means. But like you can a more abstract definition would be like being well spirited or well happy, or like you have a good soul, basically, like a good soul.
Well, I mean, it's the same. So the Sanskrit word for yao would be su. So we would say, like, for example, when you say swastika, it's actually su astika becomes swastika. So a swastika. So it is su meaning good or whatever. Meaning good, and then astika is being. So being good or being well or being that is is what that term means.
Yeah.
And so it's very similar, right? Indo-European again, like the su versus u in the Greek.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how you have the S sound going, but it's the same word.
But the same what's it called? Principle occurs when you go to evangelical. Right, it's u plus angelos becomes evangelos, right? But in English, but the similar in Sanskrit with su,
good message
plus
evangelos, or like evangelos, the good message.
Yes.
And that's same basic structure. But look at here: blessed with a good genius, fortunate, happy in respect to the days. It's not a hard word to define. I don't know why he said that. He just doesn't know Greek. So he clearly doesn't know Greek, because if he knew Greek, he wouldn't have said that. Outward prosperity, these are different words. Truly happy. So it's like, it's very simple. It's not hard. The two highest virtues in Greek thought to the Aristotelians and the Platonists was eudaimonia and arete. Virtue and good spirit are the two highest things to attain.
Right.
Even the Stoics believe this. The Stoics says virtue, arete, and good spirit is the Stoic way of life. And then, but like one of your duties was to take care of foreigners and your own kind. Xenia. Right. That's a duty. So, I don't know how he got into this word. I forgot what he's even saying here, but I guess we can keep going. But yeah, the fact that he thought this was like, it's a hard word to define. No, it's two compound words, eo and daimonia. It's a very easy word to define.
Like that kind of happiness. It's more like some kind of contentedness and satisfaction with your life, where you're flourishing, you're doing well, and you feel like things are good for you, and you think you're living well in the right way. It's how do you attain that kind of feeling about yourself?
That's fair.
And it involves having a community with like-minded people that are also feeling that way, and it involves how you interact with them. And one aspect.
You know what's so funny about this? This is a Greek concept from Greek pagans, not Christians.
Well,
this is not a Christian concept. He's talking about pagans. Okay, good. Okay,
yeah. Aspect of that is you've got to have a good character. If you're a lazy schmuck, that's probably not going to make you happy. If you're a miser and mean-spirited and greedy, it's just not going to make you happy in this sense. And so the ethics were designed in order to show how society can function and how.
So if you pause it here, what he's again, this is what he's saying is that's not a religious thing; it's a philosophical thing. So these terms
that's not
are
true
philosophical.
It's not true at all.
But that's what he's arguing.
It literally means good spirits. Like, and that's a very spiritual.
But he's saying it's a philosophical thing, not a religious thing.
Yeah, because you notice how he didn't define the word daimon. Notice how he skipped. He intentionally skipped bringing that word up, or he doesn't know it. I think it's the latter. I don't think he knows it, because you would never.
Well, I mean, he knows Greek.
Yeah, but you would. I don't think he does. I don't think he's that good at Greek.
Well, I
think he knows biblical Greek. Eudaimonia is not in the Bible, so he doesn't know this word. But I do think that this word, you cannot get out of this word being a spiritual, maybe not religious in the sense of the duties, because ancient religion is about duty. It's about but eudaimonia is a spiritual word that has to do with your spirit, your suke, your daimon, good daimon. That's what it means. So you can't just say this is just a philosophical thing. This is the Stoics were very religious. They believed in God. They were honoring God. They were not these they were not these secular philosophers like today. Neither were the Platonists. I guess the Peripatetic school were a little more in the rational direction, but even the Peripatetics believed in God. The only ones you really can point to that didn't believe in God like this were the Epicureans. And maybe some of the Cynics weren't really that big in religion either. But yeah, most of these groups, Pythagoreans, Platonists, Eleatics, Stoics, believed in God, and there was everything they did was tied to God, tied to Zeus or Theos or the hen in Platonism, whatever depending on what group. So I don't know why he keeps going to this thing where we're going to separate philosophy from religion. And then we're going to say philosophy is good because Christians borrow those ideas. And paganism is bad because Christians don't borrow those ideas. He's doing this. It's apologetics he's doing here. That's the only way I can think
kind of like it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to let him finish this thought, and I'm going to read a few super chats.
Yeah.
Life that's satisfying and meaningful for myself and be contented with my life. So these principles are laid out extensively in ancient philosophers, going back especially to Aristotle.
Yeah.
Aristotle wrote a 10-volume book, the Nicomachean Ethics, it's called, that is still taught in universities today. It's still widely read today, still widely translated today, and it is worth reading.
Yes, it is.
You talk about ethical insight. I mean, there's almost nobody in the history of the universe that's been more insightful than Aristotle on it.
And guess what, Bart? Guess what you forgot to tell them? Bart cites Greek mythology and Greek religion in this book.
Aristotle does.
Aristotle. Yeah. Guess what, Bart? Aristotle in this book is constantly citing Homer and the Greek myths and Greek religious attitudes and Greek ritual, and you're not separating this book from Greek religion. Sorry, you can't do that. Or at least from Greek myth, I should say. Maybe there might not be a lot on Greek religion, as in like your duties and like the temple, keeping up the temples and all that stuff. But you can't separate this book from Greek myth. He's constantly citing the Greek myths in here. Like I'm just flipping through it right now. I already found the one from Homer. And then he says in book 8, he's talking about friendship in this one, and other kinds of friendships. Yeah, you got citing of Homer, you got citing mentions of Hesiod, you got mentions of Orpheus in here, Zeus, the father. Here he goes. He goes, one may resemble the constitutions as if patterns of them in every household. For association of a father with his sons bears the form of monarchy, since the father cares for his children. And this is why Homer calls Zeus the father. It is ideal of monarchy to be paternal rule. Among the Persians, the rule of the father is tyrannical. They use sons as slaves. Tyrannical, too, is the rule of master of slaves. Tyrannical, too. Now, this seems to be a correct form of government, but the Persian type is perverted. Talking about the Greeks. The Greeks seem to have a correct form of government. The Persian type is perverted. He's very biased for his Greeks here. The point is, what does he cite? He cites Homer. He says Homer calls Zeus the father. Here's another Homer passage right here. He says the constitutions may be seen to involve friendship just as far as it involves justice. The friendship between a king and his subjects depend on the excess of benefits conferred. For he confers benefits on his subjects if, being a good man, he cares for them with a view to their well-being, as a shepherd does for his sheep. When Homer called Agamemnon the shepherd of the people, such too is a friendship of a father, though he exceeds the other in greatness and benefits conferred. Notice how he's using Homer as the principal examples for this type of ethics. I was reading from Nicomachean Ethics. I didn't even plan that out. I just flipped through it because I knew how easy I'd find it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this guy's thinking here. I don't know what anyone's thinking in this video. Sorry, but like this is terrible. This is like two complete amateur. Whatever. Anyways, Lev, thank you for the super chat. $20. Thank you. The goat Gnostic informant, Mr. Raghavan. Do you see the Sanskrit language being the closest to Proto-Indo-European we've got? Is the text based on visualizations during meditation? Lastly, Georgiani tomorrow on breaktherules.tv. Nice.
Well, I mean, so the Pi is a reconstructed language, right? I mean, I'm sure there was some form of Pi that existed in the past, but we don't know what that was. What we have is a reconstructed language, of which the majority of the reconstruction of Pi is based on Sanskrit, because Sanskrit, at least Vedic Sanskrit, is one of the most well-preserved branches of Indo-European, right?
Yeah. Goes back all the way to the cuneiform.
Yeah, I mean, the manuscript, the first written form, is much later, in like the 8th or 9th century CE.
The alphabetical script,
but the text and the forms of the language, like for example, the Indo-European has 8 declensions, nominative, accusative, instrumental, dative, ablative, genitive, locative, and vocative, right? So those 8 are preserved in Sanskrit. And over time, I mean, Greek has five, I believe, or 6, and now Latin has 5, and other forms of Indo-European have variation to that. Avestan is close to the Sanskrit language, so there's very, or at least Vedic Sanskrit, so they preserve a lot of this. But even the form of the words, like for example, like when you get to things like, there's been the historic conversation around the centum versus centum division of the 100, right? Where the Indo-European also breaks upon the centum, which is Latin, and the satum, which is other languages like Greek and Sanskrit, are more. The 100 is not based on centum, but it's based on satum, which is there's demarcations here, but Sanskrit seems to preserve most of these demarcations more than any other one. So I would say yes, I do think it's the closest to the reconstructed pi because it was used to reconstruct pi the most.
Yeah. By the way, all the way over here is Mitanni Aryans that they listed. They found from the 15th century. I think we talked about this last time you were on here.
Yeah, we did.
The 15th century BCE, they found Sanskrit used in cuneiform. So this is before the alphabet, and they're using cuneiform to write Sanskrit gods, Vedic gods, and they named like, what are they named? Indra? Is that what they say? Indra. I thought Mithra was on here too, right? No, Mithra.
No, but
Mithra right here.
Yeah.
Mitra, Varuna, Indra. These are Indo-European gods.
So, by the way, they're all dvandas, which is again, Varuna and Mitra are always referred together. Indragni is another dvanda, and then there's also the Nasatya, which are the twins.
Yeah, that's how you know. That's how you know it's Vedic. That's how you know it's Vedic.
Yeah,
it's very specific. I wish they had a picture of the Oh, I got a picture of it right here. But watch this, just to show you guys what it looks like. This is what they found. So when you think of cuneiform, you think of Akkadian, you think of Semitic, but really, or I shouldn't say, but really, but also, you can don't forget. There's this. This is cuneiform with Sanskrit. Remember, cuneiform is just a writing style. You can write any language with cuneiform. It doesn't have to be Akkadian or Sumerian. I think there's actually a Persian in the 3rd century or 4th century BCE that writes about Alexander the Great in cuneiform.
So there's two kind of sources here on the Mitanni. One is a horse training manual where they use verses like Ashva, meaning horse, Vartana, which means circle or going around. And then there's a treaty where you get these names of gods. So that's interesting. And as to the second point, is the text based on visualizations during meditation? Are you talking about the Vedas particularly or other texts? Like, for example, Tantras will give you visualizations for meditation using like a mixture of yantras, which are diagrams and things like that, numbers, iconography, things like that. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you for that super chat, Lev. Let's see. Oh, this one I forgot to finish. What does Bart say about mythicists? Bart says a lot about mythicists. That's like his major topic that he's like cited for. And I don't think he's wrong about the fact that I think there was a guy. But I do think Bart goes way too far against mythicists, the idea that it is possible that Jesus didn't exist. It should not be an axiom, but for some reason, people like Bart and Dan and other Bible scholars just make it an axiom. We know Jesus died in Passover. We know he lived in Nazareth. We know these things. We know Bart will even say, we know we had 12 disciples. Bart even says, we know Judas existed, despite Judah in the Old Testament being the one that betrays Joseph. But not only that, there's Psalms about the betraying one, the one that will betray you. There's Psalms about that. Did you know this?
I did not.
Betraying Judah Psalms. I don't have it on the top of my head. Psalm 41:9. Let me see if this is the one. Psalm 41:9. Even my close friend, someone who I trusted, who shared my bread, has turned against me. Psalm 41:9. What happens in the Gospels? Judah eats the piece of bread, and Jesus goes, the one who eats this bread will betray me. And what does Bart say? I think Judah definitely existed. Judas. I think he definitely existed. And I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just saying we should caution this. It might be a character plot to fulfill Psalms, right? You got a psalm about a guy who's going to eat bread with you that's going to betray you. It's a David psalm.
I mean, but again, this is where it's like, Robin Faith Walsh talks about this, Dennis McDonald, all these guys about, you take these motifs that you find in the older texts, and then you tell the new narrative so it fits those motifs, right? It happens across,
Yeah, so there could have been a guy that betrayed Jesus. I'm not saying that we know for sure there wasn't, I'm just saying these things should not be axioms that we just accept. Even my close friend who trusted me, the one I shared brother, has turned against me.
And I would agree with you. Like, there's no, for historical Jesus, we have evidence for that, right? We know there's good amount of evidence for historical Jesus. We don't have any evidence for historical Judas. Because, like,
right, exactly. We should not be. And the idea that he went down for Passover and died during Passover, we don't know that. He could have got crucified 2 weeks before that, or a month after.
Does Paul even talk about Judas?
No.
Does anyone?
Paul does not mention the Passover either.
Right.
That's a big deal. The Passover lamb and Jesus lined up. You would think Paul would mention that. That's why I think a lot of these details that we use as axioms should not be axioms.
Yeah.
I think there was a guy. I'm not a mythicist, but I do think that some of these people like Bart go way too far against mythicism. Bart said it's like saying the moon is cheese. No, it's not. If I found out tomorrow that Jesus didn't exist, somehow we found out, we used like some sort of fucking time machine and figured it out, I would not be that shocked. I would be a little surprised. I'm not going to lie. I'd be like, whoa, he didn't exist? Damn. How did they pull that off? But I would not be shocked like the moon is cheese shocked. Imagine finding out the moon was cheese tomorrow. No way. The fact Jesus not existing does not compare to the moon is cheese.
No, it doesn't.
Look at this. Jesus answered, "It is the one whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped in the dish." So, you can see they're fulfilling signs.
I mean, but yeah, it's funny to me that if he said that, he tells everyone that this guy's going to betray him.
I know, and his name is Judas. And the fact that his name is Judas there's a lot going on there theologically. Yeah. Judas is the name of Judah. Judah is the betrayer. So, anyways, I made my point. But thank you for that super chat. Let's see what else we got. Constellation Pegasus says, "I'm just messing with you, Neil. I didn't learn anything new. Don't be so gullible, McFly." Yeah, I didn't know. I thought he was about to drop something on us. Thank you for that super chat. Solara Knight, thank you for the $10, says, "Would the evolution of Saint Nicholas, the man from Myra, to Santa Claus be the same as Yeshua of Nazareth to Jesus Christ, the magic demigod myth of Catholicism?" I'm saying it's a similar, that there's really a guy named Saint Nicholas who really lived, who really was a bishop in the 4th century, and then he becomes legendary into Santa Claus. I think the Jesus story is very as parallel to that. I do think the Jesus mythology happens way faster than St. Nicholas, which is like spans of centuries go down. 9th century, 10th century, and then all of a sudden you start getting Father Christmas and so forth. But yeah, I think that's a good parallel. I think that's a good comparison. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this happens over time for anybody. Like, we build legends and stories and they become bigger than they were before and they take on new flavor, like this, I would say that there's so many examples through history. Alexander going from just, general to the son of Zeus, and then, Julius Caesar, or various, kings in India, or other saints becoming larger than life. And I mean, it's, I think, par for the course.
Yeah. That's a good point. Thank you for that super chat. Constellation Pegasus comes back and says, "Hey Neil, did I tell you I learned something new today?" Is this the same
I think that was
this?
Yeah, I think he responded back to his own message.
Okay. I was going to say, I think I read it twice already. Okay. All right. Here we go. Well, thank you again for that, Constellation. Thank you. Lyricus is in the house. What are your thoughts on the Apocalypse of Abraham? It's been a while since I've read that one, but I have a copy of it over here in my pseudepigrapha, in my handy dandy pseudepigrapha. It's been a while. I get it confused with the Apocalypse of Daniel, the Apocalypse of Elijah. There's always different apocalypses. Greek Apocalypse of Ezra, Apocalypse of Zechariah. Let's see. Where's the Apocalypse of Adam? There's so many of these apocalypses. So it's like, my thoughts right now, it's been a while since I've looked at it. I don't even know which one is the Abraham one, to be completely honest with you. Caught me off guard here. But yeah, these are all fascinating texts that people should read. Get you a copy. get you a copy of the pseudepigrapha. You read these apocalypses. There's more than one apocalypses. There's a lot of apocalypses. And another volume of these is the New Testament Apocrypha from Tony Burke. There's 3 volumes of this. I have all 3.
Damn.
Yeah, so you have 3 of the people don't realize this. They think the Bible in they think this like there's the Bible and there's 66 books, and then in some Bibles you have 74 or 76 books, and you have extra ones. You have Susanna and the Bell and Dragon, you have the Wisdom of Solomon, and you have Sirach, and they think that's it. But no, try this much more. This is just for New Testament. That's look at this. Ready? Okay, you have, let's see. I'm going to read some off. The Acts of Andrew and Philemon. The Acts of Andrew and Paul. The decapitation of John, the forerunner. It's another text. Acts of John. The Passion of Peter and Paul. The correspondence of Ignatius with John the Evangelist. The Epistle of James to Quadratus. The questions on John. The Revelation of Matthew. That's just that one. Let's go to another one. You have the Legend of Aphroditianus, the Priesthood of Jesus, the Dance of the Savior, the Economium of John the Baptist, the Life and Martyrdom of John the Baptist, the Acts of Cornelius, the History of Simon Cephas, the Life and Conduct of Holy Women, the Apocalypse of the Virgin, the Investiture of Abaton. I'm just flipping through these. That's not even all of them. Then you have the Acts of Peter, the Travels of Peter, the Epistle of Pelagia, the Rebellion of Demas, the Homily of Life, the Book of Bartholomew, the Legend of the Holy Rod Tree, this Joseph and Arimathea story. That's another volume. Then, on top of that, you got 2 volumes of the pseudepigrapha Old Testament. That was just New Testament. You got a whole stack like this of all
none of those are canon.
Extra biblical non-canon. Isn't that crazy? This is what you're looking at. Actually,
that's pretty crazy.
There's actually one more too. Somewhere. I don't know where I did with it. But yeah, this plus one more is all your extra biblical sources. I haven't read them all. Nobody has. I will one day. I will be able to say I read them all. I'm working my way through them. That's why when he said Apocalypse of Abraham, I couldn't even remember which one that is. There's so many.
I didn't even know about that text. So
no, it's a rare one. It's a rare one. But thank you for bringing that up. I love getting questions like this because then it makes me go back to my layer later and go, fuck, I didn't know something. I got to figure this out now. I got to read it now. Thank you though. Thank you. Motherfrickin' Wendy Berg in the house. Thank you for the super chat. $3. Now we don't have to go back to that. I wanted to get some more your thoughts on it, but I also wanted to bring up.
I mean, we can continue a little bit because I feel like there's a few more thoughts he's probably expressing that we can think about if they're not like.
And while I'm playing this, I'm going to pull some. I wanted to pull up Philemon and Bacchus myth, and I think there's another one that I wanted to pull up. But yeah, let's do that.
And even Christians can get a lot out of this thing. And so there was a lot of discussion before Aristotle as well, and Plato and so forth, but also long after him.
Do we know if these discussions were disseminated widely, or was this something that was mainly kept to the elite classes?
Yeah, so that most people were not reading philosophy then any more than people do now. In fact, a lot less because most people could not read, and so it wasn't that people were buying up Aristotle all the time and spending their evenings reading him. It wasn't like that. It's more. The analogy would be more like, why is it in America that basically everybody believes in, say, free enterprise? Why do people subscribe to capitalism? Is it because they've read Adam Smith? Is it because they've actually read the writings of the founding fathers? No, they haven't read the writings of the founding fathers. They've heard people talk about them, and they believe in capitalism because it's the thing they grew up with, and they just assume that anything else is bonkers. And so socialism, oh, that's dangerous. It's capitalism. Oh, communism. Oh my God.
You just described yourself talking about paganism. That's bonkers because we don't understand it. You just described not only the Christian worldview, but you described your own idea of what paganism means. You know what I mean? That was very ironic. Little Freudian slip right there.
I also think this is the interesting part because I think he misses this element here, which even if philosophy and religion are, let's say, two separate things. Religion, the masses learn about philosophy through religion. That's how they learn, through these stories, through these things that come down to them, right? Like, for example, that's very clear in the Mahabharata and the Indian tradition, is saying we are taking these Vedic ideas, these principles, this ritual, these things that the elites do, and we're making it so that you guys can digest it in the story format. In this narrative. So now these bards are going all over the country, all over the place, singing this song in festivals and in these markets. People are hearing it, learning it, and it's just bleeding into their essence. And I think that's the same thing that Greek myths do. Like I'm pretty damn sure that in that sense, there's not much difference in the religious aspect of these things, conveying philosophical, ethical, moral truths.
Yeah, well said. By the way, drawing down the dragon in the house. Thank you for the super chat. The talks with you two are amazing. Keep them coming. Diodorus Siculus tells us the first Dionysus is from India. Hell yeah. Do you think there's any connection between the Bacchans and the Bhaktis? Question for you, obviously.
Yeah, no, because I think the Bacchantes are a group of people, a particular group that adhere to a certain tradition, right? In the Dionysian tradition. Well, Bhakti is just a general term that can be applied to any deity. It's worship, adoration, reverence. Yeah. So you can say I have Bhakti towards Vishnu, or Bhakti towards, Krishna or Rama or Shiva or Devi, or I'm a Bhakta of Dionysus or Odin, whatever.
I wonder if that word, because the Bacchans are devoted to Dionysus, I wonder if the word might be connected to Bhakti.
I don't think so, because the root is bhuj, which means to I think to adorn or connect with. Yeah.
To worship.
Yeah. Here you go. Yeah. Bunch. Oh, yeah. Means to break. Sorry, to worship or whatever. So the budge or bunch is one of the roots, right? So budge becomes buck when it becomes gunavriddhi. Anyways, yeah. The idea is the idea of worship, reverence, adoration.
Look at this one though. Kama connotes emotional connection, sometimes sensual and erotic love.
Kama is,
that's a different one.
Can also mean lust. It's different from Kama, right? So Bhakti, yeah. So this is the Kama Sutra, sex and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So within the Indian tradition, there's what we call the four goals of man, which is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, which is Dharma is righteousness, Kama is desire, Artha is wealth and power or whatever, and then Moksha is salvation. Yeah, that's holy.
Whoa.
Although that I hope that's real. Oh, the Radha Krishna, that's a temple. Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's by the way, springtime festival. It's spring harvest.
Oh yeah, of course. You gotta have that.
Yeah.
That's standard for any religion.
By the way, there's multiple texts outside of Kama Sutra. There's also Anaranga. There's a couple other ones that talk about the nature of not just sex, but kind of like how to attract women, how to dress, how to talk to women talking to men and men talking to women. It's very interesting, and what the nature of those things are, right? Because the idea of pleasure is important in the Hindu framework. Life should be pleasurable as much as you can make it pleasurable.
Yeah. I want to show something I wanted to show from earlier is this. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. And I wanted to show this myth. This is on the Latin side, not Greek. From Ovid. Ooh, Philemon and Bacchus. Pious old Bacchus and Philemon of equal age were in that cottage, wedded in their youth. And in that cottage had grown together. They made their poverty light by owning it. Remember, people think that's a Christian idea of like the lowly will be rewarded. But like, look at this. You see this in Ovid in the 1st century BC. Before Christianity even existed, they're already writing stuff like this. It was of no use to ask for masters or servants in that house. They too were the whole household. Together they served and ruled. And so when the heavenly ones came to this humble home and stooping, entered in the lowly door, the old man set out a bench and bade them rest their limbs, while over this bench busy Bacchus through a rough covering. I love this translation. I wonder if translation. Then she raked aside the warm ashes on the hearth. This is a big Greek concept, the hearth, and Latin. And this is the big Greco-Roman concept, I should say. And fanned yesterday's coals to life, which she fed with leaves and dry bark, blowing them into flame. By the way, this is how you can tell this is wintertime. This is like a very Christmassy feeling. The winter, the cold, they come inside and they go by the fire and they're being warmed by the fire, right? Then she took down from roof some fine split wood, dry twigs, and before them placed them under the little copper kettle. And she took cabbage, which her husband, Ovid is such a genius poet, dude. Because even the translation is amazing. That's how you know Ovid is amazing. And she brought the cabbage which her husband had brought in front, the well-watered garden, and lopped up outside leaves. Meanwhile, the old man with a forked stick reached down to a chine of smoked bacon, was hanging from a blackened beam, and cutting off a little piece of long cherished pork, he put it to cook in the boiling water. Meanwhile, they beguiled the intervening time with their talk and smoothed out a mattress of soft sedge grass, placed on a couch with a frame and feet of willow. They threw drapery over this, which they were not accustomed to bring out except on festal days, festal times, right? But even this is like Santa Claus is here. They're giving him milk and cookies. By the way, I made a video on this. That's why I said that. I compared the Xenia, the Greek Xenia concept. We still do. We teach our kids Xenia for Christmas rituals. The kids are taught to leave out milk and cookies for Santa, and then you'll be rewarded. That's the concept of Xenia. You leave food out for the stranger, and you give them hospitality. Anyways, let's keep going. But even this was a cheap thing and well worn, a very good match for the willow couch. The gods reclined, Hermes and Zeus. The old woman, or I should say Mercury and Jupiter. The old woman, with her skirts tucked up, with trembling hands, set the table. But one of its 3 legs was too short. She propped it up with a potsherd, and with this leveled the slope, which she wiped up with her leveled green mint. Next, she placed on the board some olives, green and ripe, truthful Minerva's berries, and some autumnal corn cherries pickled in the lees of wine, endives and radishes, cream cheese and eggs, lightly roasted in warm ashes. These are strangers, guys. I don't think you realize this. These are strangers. They don't even know who these people are yet. Random strangers just showed up at their house, and they let them in, and they're doing all this for strangers. All this. All these viands and in Beau's mixing bowl of this same costly ware was set together with cups of beechwood, coated on the inside of a yellow max. A moment, and the hearth, scented streaming viands, and wine of no great age was brought out, which was then pushed aside to give a small space for the second course. Here we with nuts and figs and dried dates and plums and fragrant apples and broad baskets and purple grapes just picked from the vines. In the center of a table was a comb of clear white honey. Besides all this, pleasant faces were at the board. Meanwhile, they saw that the mixing bowl, as often as it was drained, kept filling. Here's the miracle, right? Kept filling up. They're filling wine in the jars of its own accord. It's a wine miracle. And that wine welled up itself. The 2 old people saw the strange sight with amaze and fear, and upturned hands, they both uttered a prayer, Baucis and trebling Philemon, and they craved indulgence for their fair and meager entertainment. They had 1 goose, golden goose, the guardian of their tiny estate, and him the hosts were preparing to kill for the divine guest. They don't even know who they are. They don't even know their names. But the goose was as swift of wing and quite wore the slow old people out of their efforts to catch him. He eluded their grasp for a long time and finally seemed to flee for refuge to the gods themselves. Then the gods told them not to kill the goose. We are gods, they said, and this wicked neighborhood, by the way, just to give you, if you haven't been paying attention, these 2 gods, just like Abraham's angels, they went to this neighborhood and they tried to get hospitality, and they kept getting turned down by everyone. And finally, poor old Philemon and Bacchus let them in. They don't know who these strangers are, and they let them in. And they said, "We are gods, and this wicked neighborhood shall be punished as it deserves. But you shall be given exemption from this punishment. Leave now your dwelling and come with us that mountain yonder." They both obeyed, propped up their staves. They struggled up their long slope. And when they were a bow shot distant from the top, they looked back and saw the whole country side covered with water, a deluge, great flood. Only their own house remaining. And while they wondered at this, while they wept for the fate of their neighbors, that old house of theirs, which had been small for even 2 occupants, was changed into a temple. Marble columns took the place for forked wooden supports, and straw grew yellow and became a golden roof. They were rich. There were rich gates, richly carved. A marble pavement covered the ground. And then the comely son of Saturn, Jupiter, spoke. "Now ask of us, thou good old man, and thou wife, worthy of thy good husband, any boon you will." When they had spoken this, Bacchus, Philemon announced their joint decision to the gods. "We ask that we may be your priest and guard your temple. And since we have spent our lives in constant company, we pray the same hour may bring death to both of us, that I may never see my wife's tomb, nor buried by her." Their request was granted. They're willing to die for these gods. They had the care of their temple as long as they lived, and at last, spent with extreme old age, they chanced to spend before the sacred edifice. Taking old times, Bacchus saw Philemon putting forth leaves and the tree and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, point is.
Well, it's a beautiful story, man. It's just, and I mean, again, what's the highlight? Like, he went through so much depth explaining the care, the attention, the love that they're giving to strangers that don't know they don't know their gods. I mean, I think that's a pretty strong ethic.
This is the central myth of the Greeks and the Romans, of why you should always take care of people that are on the road, that are traveling from country to country, and they have nowhere to go, and they're wet and cold, and let them inside your house and take care of them, because if you do that, the gods will treat you with whatever you need, and the gods will love you. That is a message that I don't know how Bart Ehrman could come away with saying, the Greeks didn't care about anyone but themselves, and the Christians did, though, because they got it from the Jews. By the way, notice how the same moral of this story applies to Abraham in the Old Testament, who lets the angels come in and then saves them from all the wicked neighbors that are not letting them have hospitality. You know what I mean? It's about hospitality of the stranger. So I just want people to see this, that whatever Bart was telling you was nonsense. It's objectively incorrect. It's just not my opinion. It's not my opinion versus his opinion. He's wrong, period. He's wrong. So any thoughts on that?
I've said my point, which I agree with you. There's a lot of this he's just absolutely wrong on, and my hope is he's rather ignorant than he's willfully not taking into consideration.
Look at this.
That's
Before their gates, they used to stand an altar sacred to Jove, the god of hospitality. If any stranger ignorant of this crime has seen this altar smeared with blood, he was supposed. So, like, Jove is the god of hospitality. It can't get any more clear than that.
Right.
Yeah. So I just want people to see that.
Yeah.
Oh, we got one more super chat. Solara Knight, thank you for the super chat, says Hanging Gardens of Babylon could actually inspired Garden of Eden story. Yeah, I think people have written about this too. I think this is like a well-established theory. Hanging Gardens of Babylon and Garden of Eden, right? Did you read this?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think there can be many inspirations.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how old that story of Garden of Eden is.
Not that old.
If it compares to anything in like the Eudaimonia,
the Gardens of Babylon were known to the Greek sources in the Hellenistic period. Everyone knew about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It was well known.
The Gardens of Babylon were like 6th or 7th century. Am I not correct? BC?
Yeah, I think they last into the Syrian period and around then. Yeah. So 7th century. Yeah.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's many inspirations for most of these stories across, right? It
was attested by the Babylonian priest Berosus in 290 BC. A description was later quoted by Josephus. So yeah, people knew about this all the way into the Hellenistic period. Okay. By the way, Herodotus mentions it. Herodotus mentions the wonders of the world at that time. So Alexander's not built yet. The Colossus of Rhodes not built yet, but the Temple of Zeus and Olympia was built. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon was built. And what else was it? There was a few other that was built at that time. But yeah,
sure.
Thank you for that super chat. What else? Anything else you want to do before we close this up a little bit?
No, I think we covered quite a bit today in terms of responding to Bart, and I think there's a good amount of how far did we get into the video? Like not even half, did we?
Like halfway through it. But I think that my point is all I really wanted to get across. I wanted to get people to see the nonsensical, the special pleading. That's what that video was. It was special pleading. It would if someone ever wanted to demonstrate what special pleading is, they just need to watch this video, because there's special pleading for Christianity as this moral, ethical religion that cares about its neighbors and cares about hospitality and feeding the poor. But the Greeks, no, those pagans, they didn't give a shit about that stuff. They only care about themselves. And that's literally what he saes. It's like, I just want people to see that your favorite Bible scholars might not be the best, man. Yeah. So, by the way, your channel is awesome. People really need to get out there and subscribe to this channel and check out some of this content. And it's really, really good stuff. You obviously got a video with me right here. You guys got to get out here and get on this channel. This is some good stuff going on here.
Yeah, we cover a lot of cool, interesting topics, wide ranging. Because the Indian or the Indian world is really diverse. So we cover a lot of stuff on the history aspect, and it's 4,000 years of texts and traditions and language that we have to go through.
There's no one that I can think of right now who's got more of an in-depth understanding of Vedic religions and Eastern religions right now than you.
There's tons of people. I'm just probably the one online.
No, but I think you are one of the best outlets people are going to find as far as just having a YouTuber who's not necessarily, cranking. You're not professor or anything like that. But as a YouTuber, you're not going to find a better outlet than Mara Media.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this is also my passion project. I work full time as an attorney, at a company. So I'm I just do this on the weekends and when I make time during the day.
Yeah. You have a Patreon yet?
No, I think I maybe should start one to get money for the guys to help me out. I think that's fair.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I'll definitely help you get that off the ground. There is another super chat. Let's see. GD, thank you for the 10. Says thoughts on Harappan cultural influence on early Sumerian mythology, if any. Any chance? Good question. Any chance there was significant influence from east to west via the Persian Gulf, pre-Aryan arrival around 1500 BC? I think it's a good question.
Yeah, so we don't know much about the culture in terms of their their mythology, their religion. We don't know much about anything about the Harappan culture that way. What we have material culture. So what we have, for example, is the Harappan civilization was massive. It was bigger than anything in Egypt, in Mesopotamia. It was huge. Covered a massive area, Afghanistan, all the way down to the Gangetic Plain. It was really, really big. And we know in the Sumerians had things coming from the Harappan civilization, like lapis lazuli and coral stuff. In fact, they had stuff coming from even the south of India, things you only find in South India, which are part of I think the Harappan trade routes.
Look how good these statues are for third millennium BC, and they're look how almost looks like Greek style, like how good it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you also notice the aesthetics are different, right? The men still have they're not six packed and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it's very beautiful stuff, and they have a lot of items that were existed here that went to or existed in the Harappan civilization that went to Sumeria. So one of the ideas is the Harappan people, maybe Mohenjo-daro was called Mehula by the Sumerians because they did have a lot of trade with these people. Now, I don't know how much we can say about like what cultural influence outside of material culture they had.
They're definitely contemporaneous, though. It's the same time period, and it's not that far away. So I think it's safe to say.
We just don't know what that was because we have no one's deciphered these scripts. The script is utterly undeciphered.
Yeah.
Now there's people claiming it's Vedic Sanskrit. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. It's got to be pre-Aryan though, right? Isn't this before the Aryan invasion?
Yeah. I mean, so ostensibly it is, but the thing is, this is where like there's genetic data which indicates that the steppe people came in roughly 1800 to 1500 BCE, but many people are claiming steppe isn't the origin of Sanskrit or that Indo-European language. It might come from other communities. Maybe it
might be from there. It might be from here.
Maybe, yeah. The Iranian pastoralists, which is like a group that's shared by all of, if not most of the Indo-European early communities. So it might be that. Maybe there's a few groups going around, but it's really, I think it's more complex than people want to think it. But yes, it most probably was pre-Aryan, but it could be Aryan. We just don't know yet fully. We don't have enough data.
Well, I'm fascinated by that. Like I said, definitely people should go check out your channel, Mirror Media. Hit that subscribe button. It's in the links in the description. Any projects you're working on before we go?
No, I'm lining up a couple of the people to speak to. I'm going to do another one of this philosopher called Bhattacharya on the theory of language, and how language can cause one to have spiritual experiences. And it's a linguistic theory. It's pretty awesome. And then I have a couple other a Christian and a Muslim I'll speak to in the next few weeks, and then probably have you guys on, you and Derek, and we'll do something together too.
Yeah, maybe it'll be just something more fun than me just complaining about scholars. But I'm glad to have you here because you brought some more, a different angle that I was just going to sit here and rant the whole time. So
no, it's fun because I mean these videos are important. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that like to talk stuff, but it's just they get their position out and they sound really cool by ignoring the contradictory or the other data that actually pushes back against their views.
Yeah, the nuance, exactly.
Yeah, the nuance. Yeah,
like if you're going to, this is my big thing about the whole paganism thing. If you're going to argue that there's no influence on pagans on Christianity, or you think it's very little, at least be aware of the nuance of this discussion. At least be aware of the arguments for it. At least be aware of the scholarship that is arguing for it. Before you just block it all off and pretend there's nothing going on. Same with like the topic of the dating of the Old Testament. If you think the Bible dates back to 700 BC, fine. Be my guest. But at least be aware of like what Gad Barnea and Jonathan Adler and all these other scholars from the minimalist side are saying. At least be aware of it. At least know what you're up against. At least have an argument. At least have some sort of reason why you disagree with it, rather than just nuh-uh. Yeah, I'm waiting for more scholars to talk about it before I say anything. Then then you're not a scholar then. Then you're just like me. You're waiting for the big boys to tell you what to think.
Right. And scholarship should be pushing information and gaining new knowledge. It's supposed to I'll wait till someone else unless they're like, you know what, I don't have the expertise at all on this area, and I have to wait.
But then you stay out of that topic. Then you got that's the only fair way to be that way. Either you don't have either you don't have a strong stance on it, or you do. If you're gonna have a strong stance on it, then you have to know more. You know what I mean? Fair. Yeah. I think these are fair things, even applying to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you guys do that. I mean, you guys have a lot of, or you especially have a lot of people on both sides of the aisle come out, and a lot of the conversation, you don't take a position, but you push back, and I appreciate that. It's good. I think that's like the way these conversations have to have and be done. Otherwise, it's like people sit in their echo chamber and only respond to maybe like responses to their papers or academic works, as opposed to like, what are regular people thinking? How are they approaching this? How should they get this knowledge? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, cool, man. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been great.
We'll do something again soon. I love this stuff because there's very few people in my life that I can actually have these conversations with, like this kind of stuff. And it's cool to have that. So I appreciate it, brother.
I appreciate you. And you've attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.